Q95 FM radio. Our website is www.q95da.com. Please share the live, like our pages, get the latest breaking news and reviews as it happens, when it happens, only on Q95, the big station. So, yes, we do love our little nature island, Dominica. That's why we're here tonight. And tonight we're continuing to move to revive the spirit of graciousness, of love and peace and prosperity and unity among our Kalinago and Afro-Caribbean brothers and sisters. We go until 10 o'clock tonight because it's our first live edition of the Global View on Q for 2023. But tonight we are happy to try to excavate the underlying causes of gender-based violence in our society and to explore the solutions and requisite laws, the regulations, the actions that are required, and the meaningful institutional intervention and support that is so urgently and critically required to deal with some of these issues. Here are a few problematic questions that we hope to deal with tonight, and I hope that my distinguished guests will help us to unravel some of them. What social and historical factors have contributed to the perpetual violence against women? Why is this violence bound to continue if the underlying causes are not addressed and eliminated? Is the criminal justice system to blame? Does a community turn a hypocritical blind eye to such violence? Have biblical teachings concerning women, obeying their husbands contributed to the problem? This thing of telling men they must be macho, young boys they must be macho, is that contributing to the problem? Have false notions of gender superiority contributed to this problem as well? Has a lack of education, and education, I mean education for life, economic and psychological dependency created a pool of vulnerable women who disproportionately are the victims of domestic violence? Not saying it doesn't happen to men, but we know it happens to women disproportionately. Will it take the community as a whole to solve this major scourge in our society, just as it takes a community, a village to raise a child? We start preparing to embrace Dominica's 45th anniversary of independence. You know this is coming up in this 2023, this year. If tonight's distinguished guests who are with me, and I'm delighted to have them from 7 p.m. to 8:15 p.m., Dr. Triphi Margaret Wallace. She will tell us a little bit about herself when she comes on and where she is, what neck of the woods she is in. Kalinago warrior, who needs absolutely no introduction, Miss Anette Sanford. Dr. Simone, Mathieu, who's a household name, and the Empress, who's now seriously becoming a really household name in Dominican and the Caribbean now. So we have them tonight. We're delighted to have these fantastic ladies with us tonight. But from 8:15 to 10 p.m., I will be joined by Monsignor William John Lewis, Justice Dr. Irving Andre, social scientist Mr. Simeon Joseph. For these bright, wonderful, and distinguished sons and daughters of our nature island soil, our very own, will help us to unravel the answers to these very troubling concerns about this problem of gender violence. So we will discuss, as usual, the good, the bad, the ugly, and the dangerous, but we'll do so with no malice, no anger, no personal attacks, no vilification, no divisiveness, just simply bringing back civility, caring society, and progressive economic and cultural practices. That's what we want to do. Always, of course, recognizing the imperative for true resilience and sustainability of our Kalinago and Afro-Caribbean brothers and sisters. So I thank you all sincerely for joining us tonight, you at home and abroad, and all of my guests here tonight, for tuning in to our live radio stream on our Facebook, on our YouTube pages. As usual, a huge shout out, hugs, much love, appreciation. A big thank you to our healthcare providers, our frontline workers, other public officers we know they're doing their best, often working under difficult conditions. Thank you to them. Happy to have you with us tonight. We welcome you warmly wherever you are. We embrace you, every neck of the woods or every nook and cranny in every community, every village in Dominica, in the region and globally. Let me take this opportunity as well to extend our sincere condolences to you, Dr. Irving McIntyre, from my family, the management and staff of Q95, our Global View on Q guests and panelists, and the entire Q family worldwide on the passing of your dear wife. We wish her a peaceful journey on her way to the Most High. Thank you, Sherwin, for keeping us on the air. Thank you, Lambi, on the console at Q95, directing the traffic. We will take your calls a little later. The on-air numbers are posted on the homepage of the Q95 website at www.q95da.com. But let me just give it to you anyway, because the people's voice is always a priority on the Global View on Q. So call us at 767-449-3095-9697 or 767-615-4257 and at 305-432-9624. So let's get started. And as we start, I'm going to ask Dr. Simone Mathieu to open the mic. I go first to Dr. Mathieu to get our conversation going here tonight and to take a quick peek on the final days of 2022 now in the rearview mirror on the 2 homicides from domestic violence, and looking ahead, of course, as we said, about excavating on the underlying causes of gender-based violence in our society, with more focus, of course, on solutions, requisite laws, on regulations and actions, and meaningful community, not just words, but meaningful community and an institutional support. Hopefully, Dr. Mathieu might tell us a little something about the Push Past an initiative for collaboration with 2 American universities to provide funding for master's degree scholarship programs to Dominican nationals living at home and abroad. And thanks, of course, to the collaborative efforts of Push Past 10, Western Illinois University, and Eastern Illinois University, which resulted from an interview I believe she conducted with Dr. Randy Glean, who is Associate Vice President of Global Studies at Western Illinois University and a proponent of higher education for the past 30 years, who made the offer to fund the master's degrees at his institution. So kudos, of course, to our own, to Dr. Randy Glean. I hope I said all of these things correctly. Dr. Mathieu, you get the first word. Over
yes. Yes, you did, Mr. G. Thank you for that. And good evening to you. Happy New Year to you and to our listeners at home and abroad, our Facebook and YouTube live audience. I see the Facebook audience is already coming in. Anithia and Penny Shelley, thank you for saying good evening. Thank you for being here. Don't forget to share the live as you come in. And yes, Mr. G, I think it is so important that we're continuing to have these conversations on gender-based violence, because we simply cannot see Dominica continue along the line that we ended 2022 on, as well as started 2023, where we had back-to-back murders of Velma Valmont and Avanel Charles. And I want us to remember their names. I want us to speak their names because they are true representation of what is wrong in Dominica, something that has been hushed for too long, something that we need to raise the veil on and explore and excavate, as you mentioned. But I'm truly hoping that we start with the conversation this evening, but we continue. I'm hoping that this is a call to action. I'm hoping that from this conversation, we are creating an action plan for where do we go from here? How do we eliminate this scourge of domestic violence that we're seeing in Dominica that is very much hush-hush? And I know that we have a couple of people on the panel today who will share on very important topics. But I hope that we will cover information such as the cycle of domestic violence, the signs, the red flags that anyone can recognize to know if you're in an abusive situation. I'm also hoping that we look at the circumstances that foster abuse. And Mr. J, I want to thank you for mentioning the collaboration with Western Illinois University and Eastern Illinois University, because one of the things we have to look at is how are we as a community investing in our girls, investing in our women so that they do not have to remain in abusive relationships, right? I'm also hoping that we look at areas such as toxic masculinity, which you alluded to earlier, in terms of how our young boys, because it starts with our boys, how are young boys being socialized to see women, right? How are they being socialized? Who are the folks having the impact on them with regards to their socialization and their worldview of a woman's role in society? Because a lot of the violence we see against women stems from the socialization of our young men, right? So I'm also hoping we will talk about how do we manage our anger? How do we manage our stress? Because we know that Dominica tends to be a very stressful situation where there are lack of opportunities for employment, there's a lack of opportunities for growth, and that leads to stress. So I'm already happy that you mentioned Western Illinois and Eastern Illinois University, because I think what we are seeing is that we have to give people opportunities so that they can advance their life, so that if they're in a difficult situation, they will simply say, this is not for me. I do not rely on you financially, which is a big part of why women stay in abusive relationships. They do not have the knowledge, they do not have the skill to be able to advance themselves financially. So they have no other choice. There are no safe houses in Dominica. What are we doing as a community to ensure that those who want to leave these situations have options? So as you can tell, Mr. G and the panel, we have a lot to cover this evening. I'm looking forward to the conversation, but more importantly, I am looking forward to the action plan that we will come up with in terms of where do we go from there. And I'm also hoping, Mr. G, that we can have follow-up conversations to say this is the action plan that we laid out today, January 10th, 2023. Maybe 3-4 months from today, we come back and we say, well, Dr. Triphi's counseling services have resulted in X, Y, and Z. And this has resulted in X, Y, and Z, because this has to be more than just us having this conversation. It has to be an action plan. So again, thank you for the opportunity to be on this program this evening. I'm looking forward to the contribution of the panel. And I'm also looking forward to our engagement with our callers, as well as our Facebook Live, Tina Belda Ramon, David Joseph, Claralyn Washington. Great to have you guys on board, and we're looking forward to your contribution. Mr. G?
Yeah, thanks a lot, Simone, for these opening remarks there. We also have quite a few people on YouTube who are following us. Obviously, we want to embrace them and reach out to them and acknowledge them and thank them for tuning in. They could be doing something else, but they're here with us tonight. I think it is good to get the kind of listenership that we will be getting tonight. We know that people worldwide are listening, because this topic is extremely important, and we need to do something to eliminate this in Dominica. I want to go over to Empress. Now, when I go over to Empress, the first thing I want to say is this, that I only know her name as Empress. I heard her on a couple of programs on Q95, one with Matt and I think with somebody else. I was impressed with the Empress because I heard some of her contributions, and in fact, she even made a contribution on her own personal experiences. It is something that it's always good to have that kind of testimony, because then people take you seriously when they know, look, I'm not just talking for the sake of talking. I've been there and I've done that. And here's how I came out of it. And you can come out of it as well. And you can be doing something positive. You don't have to allow that negative space in your life to hold you back. You can move on, right? And this is why I wanted to hear from Empress. Now, I don't have all of her qualifications, except I know that she has many more than what I have, because I know for a fact that she has graduated with a master's degree, right? And she's going to tell us all about herself. I don't want to put the words out there. I want her to tell us herself. If she feels like it, she will even tell us her real name, because all of Dominica knows her as Empress. Over to you, Empress.
Good evening, peace and blessings, peace and blessings, peace and blessings to everyone worldwide. And the panel, good evening to each and every one of you all. It's my pleasure to be here with everyone, to be here with our YouTube guests, our Facebook guests, and all the listeners who are listening right now. I always have to, it takes me back when people always ask, well, what's your real name? So I always have issue when people say, what's your real name? And I said, if you tell me your name was Jane, I wouldn't question your name is Jane. So when I say Empress, everybody always asks, well, what's her real name.
Right.
My name is Empress, though it may not be on my government issued ID.
Okay.
But for those who are listening, I returned from New York back to Dominica about 2 years ago. So, but most people who know me actually even in New York and here, knows me as Empress. But my government issued name is Anthea. But here's the issue I always have when you tell Dominicans your name. You say Anthea and they say Anthea. Now,
Yeah.
working in the school system, I say there is a TH. It's Anthea. It's Anthea Scarrett. I have my other last name is DiVincentis. But most people know me as Empress. So we'll leave that as that. So everybody who knows me knows I'm Empress, and Mr. G says, the Empress. I said, I was laughing. I said, we're going to have issues in Dominica. And you says, the Empress. And then, Dominican. I said, well, what makes her the Empress? So I go by Empress, plain and simple. So for me, a little bit about myself. I have my master's in criminal justice. I graduated from Monroe College. I have my bachelor's in business management. I have an associate's in marketing, and I have an aesthetics degree. So that's a little bit about myself. I say I've worn many hats from, going back. I've worked in the school system. I've worked with the young women. I've done a debate team. I had to coach the debate team. So I love a good debate. I love a good debate. So I led the debate team back in New York and a high school in New York in Westchester County. Also traveled with them to Albany for their competition or to sit on the board. I've worked in the retail sector for many, many years as retail management in cosmetics and fragrances. And I've had my wellness business in New York. So when I came back to Dominica, I started my wellness business here. So I do a little bit of everything. I say there are many hats. You ask me which one I'm wearing today. We'll see. Depends on the situation. Tonight, I'm bringing on my criminal justice hat. And I remember the vice president of my college, he always says, your degree, your education is your meal ticket. You may not have to use it every time, but you have it. So when it calls for it, you can reach back and you can show it, but you don't have to walk around saying, I am this or I am that. I say, when it calls for it, then I will use it. So here we are tonight on the issue of domestic violence. And listening to the news as the year ended, it just touched me learning of the two sisters who were murdered. So I don't like to say the two sisters that died, because they did not just die. They were murdered. They were brutally murdered by their significant other. And I won't even say a lover, because I said, how can you say you love someone and then you hurt them in the manner how they were killed? So I say by their significant intimate partner that they were murdered. And it really just touched my deepest part of my soul, my stomach. Just something happened when I heard of that. And I said, there's sometimes, even Maya Angelou, in one of her poems, she said, we can't just sit on our laurels, and just keep our head buried in the sand or wait for someone else to step up to the plate. And something just happened where I said, I have to come forward. I have to put on that hat right now. And especially the fact that I went through a situation, and thank God I'm still here to speak about it. I went through a situation when I came back from New York here in Dominica, and still it's an ongoing issue. So it takes sometimes when you have been through a situation, a violent situation, that you can speak of it because there are many times people say, well, they look at you and they say, well, if you have a degree in criminal justice, and with my degree, my content is domestic violence and juvenile delinquency. So theoretically, by books, everything, it on paper, all the signs, you read it, it. But when it comes to issues of the heart, it's like, here's the heart and the brain going, you love that person and that what they're doing is wrong. But here the educated part of you think you can fix things, right? You can fix the person, or, and we make excuses, and you look at the person and he says, oh, I know their background, why they were abused and they were this, and you make excuses for them and you stay. knowing that you're going through that situation, you know. So it just, it just had me, I had to step up to the plate and says, we're going to do something about it. And then, so a few people called me about doing a show about, what's going on. And I started actually on last Saturday, while I was, I'm usually selling in front of court. So most people know me as I'm vending out there. So when they heard me and they heard my degree, they came to my table and they said, well, Empress, you have all these degrees, and what are you doing vending, out there? And actually, I enjoy it. I've been in retail. I'm always a talker. I've been in retail for many years. I love engaging in people. I worked in the school system in New York, in Westchester County school system for over 14 years. So I'm always engaging with people. So doing what I do, I enjoy what I do. And it's no stress for me. When I come, I enjoy creating and I bring it out there. So last Saturday, I had at my table 2 boxes and just opening for donation for the sisters, for their family, because it just really touched my heart. As a mother, I have 3 daughters myself back in New York. And I said, now there's especially Avenel Charles, having 7 children. And I say to myself, now they've lost their mother and their father. And those are 7 children. And though we as society might say, well, why didn't she leave? And that's always the question people ask, why didn't they leave? Okay, in regardless to whether this is where we are right now. So who is going to take in 7 children? Who is going to care for 7 children? So now we have to think about all the ramifications of that, how we go forward, how we going to help the children, to get past that trauma or to deal with the trauma. How are we going to deal with Velma's daughter, who's here and who've witnessed, part of that. So there's a lot of discussions that has to be had, with our community, with each other. And it takes, like you say, it takes a village. And we as the village have to come together to rectify some of these issues. There's so many different aspects. We have to come together. A lot of times people put it to the government. Well, you know what? We can't put everything to the government. It's each and every one of us doing something about it, to doing our part. It's just like in any you would say grassroots program. It takes somebody who is going to do this part of it. It takes someone that's going to do that part of it. But collectively together, we're all coming together to make a difference. And I'm happy I'm here to give a little bit about, to weigh in on the conversation. So thank you very much. And I can't wait.
All right. So, Empress, before I go on to Anette, and I just wanted to ask you a little bit about that experience outside of courts, because I think that was an important initiative, going outside of court. Was that on Friday morning or Saturday morning?
On Saturday morning.
Saturday morning. So I'm sure there was a natural flow of people on that whole street there in front of courts.
Yes.
And so the message that you were trying to bring on, how was that received there? What kind of reception did you get there?
Actually, it was a lot of people, their hearts were heavy. Their hearts were heavy because what I did, I had 2 boxes. So my decorative skills. So I had 2 boxes and I had their names on there, different colors. And then there was a slot in the box. So what I did is, if you wanted to donate monetarily, you could donate. And then I also had little cards. So you can write something on the card and put it in the box. Because even when I was leaving the school before I came here, my students did this thing. It's called a rainy day card. So each of them, they wrote something on the card and put it in the jar. So when there are times I may miss them or feeling lonely or whatever the case may be, I could reach in that jar and pull out something, whether it's I love you, Miss D, I miss you, or whatever the case may be. So what I said to people, on the card, whatever comes to your heart, and think of the family. Whatever comes to your heart, you can write it on the card and slip it in the box. So when they do, the money, yes, the money will help. But I think those comforting words are what's going to help them to get through the healing process. So I encourage people, even if you don't have any money to donate, just write something on the card, and slip it in the box. So, one of the security guard was, and then I had the skeptics also. They're the skeptics that came in and say, well, how do we know that they're going to get, the money, or there are always skeptics when you're doing something like that, because even growing up in New York, there's so many people, you go to a supermarket or something and they have a jar, help someone with cancer or help someone, and then they never gets to who it needs to get to. Well, I could assure you, and that's why I created the box the way it is, so everything goes in, nothing comes out. So I was saying I was just going to do it that weekend, but someone told me you should just have it there, for a little while. The people who probably didn't come last week, if I'm there this Saturday, and they can come by this Saturday, and whoever wants to help, they can come in and just put something in the box for them, and it would just help. It's just something that someone says, if I'm working with an organization, to do it. And I said, no, it's just, that's just how I am. If I see there's a need, I would do it. There are times when, even coming here, I used to do the feeding the homeless, and I would do 10 meals every Sunday or every other Sunday. I'll do my 10 meals. I prepare it, I bring it down, and I know where, the people are, and I bring it and feed them. In New York, I did the same thing. So it's just me. It's who I am. If I feel there's a need, I don't have to wait for someone to step up or say, I'm going to help you. I do it. And whatever I can do, and leave it at that. So I thank you to everyone who did come by, because I have my regular people who come by. I said at my table, they come by. It's like therapy session every Saturday. So the people who did come by, who did donate it, who did put something in the box. And thank you to Matt, because he did. I was on there on Saturday morning.
That's it.
We spoke. And there's some people who did come by and they say, hey, are you Empress? And I said, yes. They said, oh, we heard you on the radio. And they said they think it's such a great thing that you're doing, and to keep it going. And just one more thing, even from that occurred on Saturday. And I also had a sign-up sheet that if anyone who wanted to get in touch with me, because I'm going to have a program that I'm going to be dealing with those issues with women. And I had a woman who called me. A few people actually called me from Saturday to today, and someone who was in an abusive relationship reached out to me Saturday night. Sunday morning, I was on the phone with her for over an hour, and she left the house. She was in an abusive relationship, had a child, had to leave the child with someone else, and it's very wow. So now we've opened up a can of, and the can is there, and now we have to deal with it, and you're going to get the calls, you're going to get the people that are saying, they're afraid. And basically a lot of people are afraid to leave these relationships, because where do they go? So that is one of the things we'll be addressing. When everyone say, why did they leave? And I says, where are they going? There are no places that are put in place for women, battered women, to go to. So when you say, why didn't they leave? If she has 7 children, where is she going to go with 7 children without anything in place for her to go, to know that she's going to be safe? Any safe houses? There are no safe houses that I know of in Dominica for women who are going through abuse to go to those places to get help. There is no toll-free number. There is no helpline, as far as I know, that they can call and says, I'm in trouble. Please help me. In New York, there's my sister's place. There are different women's shelters. There are other places you can go to get assistance. But here in our beautiful nature island, we have none of that. So of course, the situation perpetuates itself and continues going on, because where are they going to go? So until we address those issues and not just talk about it, but be about it, we are going to keep on having that problem.
Well, Empress, I want to thank you for that introduction, and thank you for the things that you do. Every step counts, even if it's a
Yes.
small step at first, everything counts. And so we have to thank you for what you're doing. It takes a community, as we said, and each individual one of us, if we can contribute something, if the organizations, the private sector, the public sector, the churches, all of the civic organizations, if they can see this as a major issue for the society and
Right.
agree collaboratively that they're going to
Right,
be
because it does affect society on a whole, and people just think it's just one issue. Collectively, when one woman is abused, the whole community is affected. We may not think so, and some people say it's not my problem. It is all of our problems.
all of us problems. Now,
Yes.
the reason I'm starting off like this, because I know that Annette, as I go to Annette, I know that Annette herself has been doing things for quite a while in her community. And I hope that when she comes, let's talk about the underlying causes and then some of the actions that are required. I hope she will tell us something about the things that she's been doing for quite a while in her own community, which I'm sure has gone a long way to help not only women, but men and people in her community. But because we're focusing tonight on gender violence to some extent, right? I hope that she can share with us some of the things that she herself has been doing that might contribute to some of the solutions. Anette, let me go over to you now. Are you muted? If you're muted, you might want to unmute your mic.
Good evening, Mr. Gregoire.
Hi.
Good evening to your listeners. It's indeed a pleasure to be here with you, as well as with the other wonderful women on this panel. This topic, gender violence, with specific focus on violence against women, I think, has been on the forefront of Dominica's issues for quite some time. It's just that we have not been able to effectively and efficiently manage those issues. And I call it an issue, a situation, because there are solutions to these problems that we have in the society right now. And it shouldn't have taken these 2 deaths that we just experienced within the past 2 weeks to have realized, hey, we are at a point where we need to do something. We have had women, hundreds and hundreds of women who have been facing these situations every day. And I'm speaking from my nursing experience. I've had situations where people have spoken to me about what they were going through. And it is an issue that is not specific to any social class, because I have seen women who are holding great jobs, women who are married to men who are considered quote unquote high in society, enduring these kinds of violence, and yet they're afraid to come forward and speak to it or do something about it. So it's a very ticklish issue. No one situation has a specific solution to it, because it's all different. It comes in various forms, but there are general things that we can do. And tonight I specifically want to focus on gender inequality, because I am from a minority population, which is the Kalinago territory. And one of the problems that we face is that many of our women tend to be in need of, some form of economic development. Some of them need jobs, employment to develop themselves. Our young girls, they need some form of guidance, role models, and all of that. And therefore, they become vulnerable to people who tend to have a little bit more than they do, specifically to men who tend to have a lot of wealth, for example. And we see it now more in these times, particularly because of the economic situation of Dominica, where everybody is having the difficult moments, but within the territory, it is a little more challenging because of the high unemployment rate. And a lot of our young women tend to fall prey to these kinds of situations. So over the past few months, I've been working for quite a while now in terms of helping our women to empower themselves, to rise above the levels of poverty that tend to be affecting the indigenous people. And just recently, we launched what we call our sporting activity, which is our football program. And people may say, what is sports? What is football? But sporting is an activity where you can learn to manage your emotions, and also it gives them an opportunity to vent. And we're also using the opportunity to get someone in to teach them about abusive situations, what they can do to rise above that, what they can do, who they can go to speak to, people that they can access, and so on. However, within some of these programs that I'm running, it has its own challenges, because the institutions or the organizations that we expect to be able to assist these people, often they are not functional. They may have a name, a broad name, but it's not functional. For example, the Bureau of Gender Affairs, at one time, well, they do offer housing for women, safe housing for women, for up to 3 months to 6 months, which is very good. So for a woman who is being abused, they can get safe housing from the Bureau of Gender Affairs for 3 to 6 months. What if within those 3 months or the 6 months, this woman is not able to get out of her situation? What happens next? The problem is there's not sufficient funding to continue with this woman, so it becomes an issue. So we can clearly see that these ministries or these sectors within the government need to be funding injected into these areas. And time again, even during budget debate and parliament discussions throughout our short space of time that we were in parliament, suggestions were given, but are those suggestions taken seriously and acted upon? Most times, no. These sectors do not get any funding. So right now, if you go to let's say the welfare division, they will tell you that they need more human resource. They will tell you that they need more financial resources to be able to help the individuals that are being abused, both children, including young girls, and the adults. So the government needs to do more in terms of funding for these sectors to be better able to help these institutions to function effectively. Because even from a grassroots level, I am doing these activities. When it comes to actually doing and getting help for these people, there's often a roadblock because you cannot get the help that you need from the organizations that you're supposed to get the assistance from. And that is an issue. So the issue of violence against women, it's multifaceted. There's no one way to solve it. And then we also look at our men. For example, in the Kalinago territory, our men tend to believe that they are the ones to be in charge. And we have always had that belief, that cultural belief for some time now, that men are supposed to be leading and the women are supposed to take a back seat, or the role of the woman is in the home. And therefore you find that, well, right now, Indigenous women are moving out of that belief and they are fending for themselves. They're finding jobs. They too are becoming more independent women and better able to provide for their families. But with all that, the men are becoming neglected. It is said that 1 in 3 women globally are affected by violence against women. So for example, if you have 2 friends, wherever you are, if you're at home, think of 2 friends. And if 2 of those friends are not being abused, then perhaps you are being abused. 1 in 3 women being abused every day. And the men, although they abuse the woman, what you see happening is that most of these men tend to commit suicide. About 95% of suicide deaths are deaths from men, the male. So the male, they beat the woman, yes, but then they commit suicide. They kill themselves. There's nowhere where they could actually vent and give out those emotions. So they keep it all inside, and then they end up hurting themselves in return. So it's violence against themselves, suicide. How are we helping our men in society to become better men? How are our families, husbands and wives, helping shape the young boys to grow up to be able to respect women and to better be able to work with women and to appreciate women and value women for who they are? So it's not just about the women, but it also has to engage speaking and discussing with the men, having the men on board. And that is why I'm very happy that you have a panel of men following this discussion, because it's very important that they too form part of this conversation, because our men play a critical role in ensuring that violence against women does not continue. And as a Kalinago individual, I am very saddened at what happened to our dear sister Velma. She is my cousin, my uncle's daughter, and besides that, we were very close. It was a very hard situation to really swallow, but I'm thinking about it now, and I'm just hoping that they will get the justice that they deserve. Although both families are hurting, both the perpetrator and the family, the victim. But again, our court systems, it's very slow. We often do not get quick responses to our cries or our legal claims. And from what I gather in speaking to the family, when Velma called the police to come to their rescue, they said that they were not getting involved in men and women relationship, which is again another problem. Because for me, I had a personal experience like that, where there was a young person in the community going through some mental health breakdown, and all the neighbors around were calling on the police to come and do something about it, to try to help get that individual to the clinic, and they were all denying them the help. So I went personally to the police to make that report and to request that they assist, and they denied doing anything about it, and with the claim that they are not trained in mental health, and therefore, unless something happens, they cannot really do anything about it. So that again, you see, there are so many problems from different angles that we need all hands on deck to be able to get to the root of these problems and to get the appropriate solutions. We need it from our police force, we need it from our schools, we need it from our churches, we need it from our politicians. And yes, of course, we need it from our politicians, because as a politician myself, I get to experience firsthand abuse in the House of Parliament. And then what was the response? We see that a lot of our people tend to tolerate this form of abuse. Whether it's verbal, it is a form of abuse against women. So you as a parliamentarian, a woman, a female, standing and being abused verbally by another parliamentarian, and instead of him being corrected, you see people clap, people laugh, people smile, and people accept it. It's okay. And that is another problem, because if you have the problem being continued by your leaders, then the followers are going to do the same. So our leaders need to play a critical role in ensuring that whatever they do and whatever they say has a positive impact on our young boys and our young girls going forward. I will stop there for now and allow the others.
But let me just ask you this, Annette. I mean, because you're a parliamentarian, you're a politician, you've been in the parliament, right? And you are in the parliament. Does it make it a little worse when a parliamentarian, a female parliamentarian, gets abused by a male parliamentarian, and there are women who are also parliamentarians on the other side of the aisle, and they do not empathize, they do not find a way to make any input that they may be some of the people who are actually clapping as well? How does that feel? Because you see, that too is a part of the problem, because women have to understand, not because you are in a situation of power where men also are on your side, it does not mean that you cannot understand the dilemma that we're facing when a woman is being abused. And even if you are on the other side, you should be able to stand up and say, because your turn could come, it could happen to you as well. Doesn't it make it feel a little worse when you find women who are supposed to know better are clapping when those things happen?
Of course, it is worse, because we're supposed to be looking out for each other. I mean, it was just recently that we started having more female parliamentarians. And before, as you know, you had a majority of males. So now that females are coming in, the environment should be one that would encourage other women to come in. But when that kind of behavior ensues in Parliament, it prevents other women from wanting to come in. And it is very important that you have women at the head of the table making decisions, because women right now also play a critical role in the progress of our country. So it is indeed very sad that we get to tolerate these kinds of abuse, both at the top level and whether it be from our leaders in churches, in whether it be leaders in parliament, whether it be leaders in our communities, whether it be leaders in even in our homes. We have to be able to stand up and tell them that they're going down the wrong way.
Well, thank you so much for that intervention. I really appreciate that, especially when you talk firsthand like this of the experiences that you had, not only in the parliament, you're subject to a type of verbal abuse, but from the point of view of what you're actually doing on the ground to help the situation. Because I'm sure many women in your community, and probably males as well, because if you've launched a sporting activity, it means that men too are getting some coaching, which is very important to ensure that you minimize the amount of abuse that they could commit when they themselves go out there in the world. So thank you for that, and thank you for sharing that with us. I wanted to go over to Dr. Wallace. Dr. Wallace, I left you for last here because you know why? Because I wanted us to look at all of this, some of the underlying factors there. You see all the causes and so on. But I know that you have some solutions in your mind. So you can deal with what you see as some of the underlying causes as well. But certainly from your experience and knowledge, you might want to suggest, and the environments that you've lived in, that you've seen institutional arrangements that are set up to take care of those problems, you might want to share with us some of your thoughts on some of that. But then when I come back to you a little later on Empress, I want to challenge you on the whole question of debates, because you see, it's very important to have those debates taking place, especially about subjects like that. Debates between men and men, between women and women, between men and women, debates in the school, debates in the churches. We need to have the debates so people can iron out the issues and confront them and come to realize what are the mitigating circumstances and arrive at the solutions together. This is the point, together. So Dr. Wallace, maybe you can tell us a little bit about yourself as you come in. Let everybody know that who you are really, and then let's get going.
Thank you so much, Mr. Gregoire, for the invitation. This is a powerful subject. It is so impactful. When somebody gets harmed by domestic violence, it's not just the individual, nor is it the abuser only. We're talking about families, and we're also talking about communities. Ms. Sanford was saying that 1 in 3 women, if you're sitting in a group of 10, three women are going to be likely experiencing domestic violence. Now, what is domestic violence? Before I start, I'm Dr. Triphi Wallace. People in my community of Cottage know me as Tone Tone. I'm a licensed psychologist. I'm a licensed professional counselor. I'm an advanced clinical hypnotherapist. I practice Reiki. I heal and I teach. My first clinical practicum experience was in a little domestic violence shelter in Minnesota. And that was my introduction to watching victims try to escape, and try to recover from the damage of domestic violence. Now, domestic violence is not just physical. Domestic violence is a pattern of behavior that is meant to control somebody else's actions. It's that simple. And people use physical force, they use verbal force, they use verbal aggression, they use financial control. I have the money, and so sometimes I don't even have to touch you if I can tell you that I'm not going to give you any money. People use their physical stature. They don't even have to touch you. People use their looks, their demeanors. They don't even have to touch you. People use psychological abuse where they're not touching you, they're not controlling you, but they're making these subtle threats to you. Or they start with little things like name calling, criticism. We wonder, why do women stay? Well, nobody walks up to you and says, hey, you're so lovely, can we go out on a date? And proceeds to slap you. It doesn't happen like this. It's slow and gradual. I had a lovely interview. I call it lovely because we have to keep talking about this. It's lovely. We have to keep talking about it so we can come up with solutions for it together. I spoke with a wonderful young lady from my community who is not in the country anymore, who lives in the US, who shared her story. And she explained how her husband was the most ideal mate. And they had dated and she'd seen none of those signs. They dated for a year before they got married. And things started changing. Every situation is individual. There are no clear patterns. And so that presents a huge problem when you start talking about, well, what are the causes and what are the solutions? Because each situation is different. I will highlight some groups of causes, and we can talk about some groups of solutions. But again, we have to remember every situation is individual. One person who's being abused might have no kids, and another might have 7, like Ms. Avenel Charles. And we have to bear all of those factors into consideration as we try to come up with solutions. So here are some common causes or triggers of domestic violence. I'm going to start at the individual level. Mental health problems. Many perpetrators, a perpetrator is the person who's actually committing the violence. And again, I gave you a description for what violence might look like. As simple as not giving you money if I'm the breadwinner of the home. That's an example of violence. It's meant to control your behavior. You have to do what I have decided you have to do. And so I will do whatever it takes. So mental health problems. Many perpetrators have personality disorders. And we're talking about disorders like narcissistic personality disorder, antisocial personality disorder. Antisocial personality disorder is not about being, a loner. It's about criminal behavior. People who have no qualms doing things they know that are wrong and that could lead to legal consequences, but they don't care. And they could be the most charming and handsome and successful in the community, but this is what they are in their one-to-one interactions. Very often, people who do experience violence have a history of anxiety and depression already, pre-existing. So that's something to look out for. See, because if I'm a person who's already struggling with anxiety, the first time somebody calls me, we say it up here, out of my name, I might be less quick to say, hey, I don't know if you meant to hurt me with this word or these words, but they make me feel uncomfortable. I don't feel good when you speak to me that way. I do not want you to talk to me like that anymore. And if you persist, I'm going to terminate this relationship we're having. So if you have pre-existing anxiety, this is not your first move. Instead, you might keep quiet about it and actually hope that it goes away without addressing it. But this is a pattern. So these things start with little seeds before they mushroom into murder. So here's another reason why people commit violence, factors that are associated with violence: poverty and unemployment. We know that many, if not most, relationships break up, and one of the main reasons relationships end is financial problems. And so when you have particularly a man who's been socialized to believe I am the breadwinner, I'm the provider. A man's sense of self is deeply rooted in his ability to provide. So he does not have the ability to provide. You'll see it in your homes. Your man will become very depressed. But a lot of male human beings, when they experience depression, it doesn't turn inwards, it turns outward. It turns outward. So the behavior, so the sadness gets externalized as opposed to internalized, which is what happens for many women. Women will get quiet, but a man might act out, so to speak. Here's another potential cause. Relationship retention. Relationship retention is mid-guarding. If a person feels threatened, rightly or wrongly, when I say rightly or wrongly, many perpetrators will accuse their women of cheating without evidence. And that's connected to some mental health problems like paranoid personality disorder, paranoia, and they will go around the community accusing their woman of having cheated on them. I saw her do this. They will leave. I have stories. Men who leave recording devices under their beds, who track their spouse's phone or their girlfriend's phone, who dig in, who hack. The young lady talked about her husband who hacked every device of all of her sisters so that he could control her behavior. That's the point of the abuse. Cultural factors. Ms. Sanford just talked about it. She described it in the Kalinago territory, but worldwide, this is an issue. It's not just Dominica. Most cultures have decided that, and we've done this for eons, that the male human being is the leader in the relationship. And I don't know that we've done a very good job teaching the leaders how to lead well. It's fine that we have one leader of a relationship. That could be the model that you prefer. Many women are saying no to this model because it's not in our best interest. We've realized it's not in our best interest to just say, yes, you are the leader, just carte blanche. Yeah, so many women you see are deciding, hey, I'm going to work so that economically you don't have to be my leader. If your leadership comes with this amount of pain, I don't want that leadership. And so a wise human being will make a decision like, hey, I will put myself in a position that I don't have to be so vulnerable to you. But that's individual. Still at a huge cultural level, we've given male human beings the role of leadership in relationships and in our family lives. And without proper education of how to manage power, we see how human beings deal with power and unbridled power. It is not good for us. It is not good for human beings to have power without accountability or without systems that check that power. So an abusive person, abusers, I believe, are checked by other men. A male abuser is checked by another man, by the brothers, the uncles, the fathers, the sons. I wrote a post that I have not heard of many men who continue abusing their wives and their women when their little boys grow up to be strong, strapping teenage men with the muscles on them. It stops. Why does it stop? It's a strength and power issue. It's not about because I'm a man. It's because I'm afraid that I'm going to get hurt by somebody potentially stronger than I am. That's what the legal system is supposed to do. It's supposed to be that force of accountability to check unbridled power. But if you do not, number one, set up the system to check that behavior, which let me tell you is going to happen. It's going to happen. We can't just bury our heads in the sand and just pretend it's not going to happen. So we have the problem. We cannot ignore the problem anymore. 2 women, the beginning of the year, when everybody is focusing on their goals for the year, 2 women dying like this, being killed like this. being murdered like this, this is a sound that should ring across the island, across the world, that you have a problem that is so big, you must stop now and address it. So we need systems in place. We need communities that will say, I support you. I am here for you. Many of us in the community, I'm coming to solutions now. We need systems. I know we don't have a lot of time. We have more people to come on here, so I can't go on forever. We need systems in place at the top. We're talking about governmental systems, social welfare systems. We need housing, safe housing for women and kids, because even as we look at the communities to say, yes, back in the day, somebody would give you a little sukuwe, a little rescue. The thing about it is, times are harder. And so we have to be practical. If money is short and tight, every family must make a survival decision. Can I take in 7 of my sister's kids? Or are the kids now going to have to be split up? One goes to the godmother, to the this, to the that. More pain, more trauma. So we have evolved as a culture to where we need the social system, the structure of safety, and essentially of last resort, but a way through the big problem. A way through the big problem. When you have housing, we don't have to have many. They could be, and these homes cannot be broadcasted about, because perpetrators cannot know about these homes, because perpetrators will find victims. Even women, we say, why have they not left? Many women have tried to leave. Many women try to leave. They file restraining orders. The perpetrators might still break those restraining orders. So we have to be thoughtful and responsive and plan to address the problem. It would be criminal almost. It's like watching an accident happen and just leaving your hands off like this. It would be criminal after this loud of an echo for something that is in and of itself so horrendous. You have 2 within 24 hours on an island where this doesn't really happen like that, where just murder itself is not common. Well, I don't know that I can say that about the past year, but you all know what I'm talking about. We must do something about this. On the community level, we have to be willing to ask questions, provide support. It is not an easy process. It's a psychological indoctrination process. It's slow. It creeps up on you. So as Empress says, with all of her background, you don't see it. Your heart wants to love the person. Your heart wants to give the person an opportunity to do better next time. Many of us women are socialized to, hey, you have to love, and love in a kind of way that is almost against your best interest as a human being. That's another thing we have to unlearn. So education, life skills training from elementary school, where we learn communication skills, we learn relationship skills, how to be together respectfully. You just have to spend 2 minutes on Facebook to realize how we've lost the ability to do that well. So we just have to learn it again. Women need support, and they need resources. Support and resources. And many times, even when they have the resources, because again, this is an individual process, and it's almost like a brainwashing, indoctrination process that happens with the threats, with the cycle, like Dr. Mathieu was saying, the cycle of violence, where you have an event, you have an explosion, but the next phase of that domestic violence cycle is all of the, I'm so sorry, I'll never do this again.
The honeymoon.
The honeymoon phase. And both people become addicted to that process, because we are human beings. We are not robots. We want it to work. So of course, when this person now comes bringing you gifts because they're so sorry, they don't know why they did that. Actually, you made them angry.
Mhm.
Ridiculous, number one. Nobody can make you feel anything. Nobody can make you angry. And they definitely cannot make you act. So, but it's all part of that process. And then you start going up again, where we start building the tension again. No, we start walking on eggshells because the perpetrator gets a little moody. They start isolating. They start getting critical again. And then you have another event. And then you come back to the gift giving and the I'm sorries. And we just keep doing this, keep doing this. So this is not an easy problem to fix, but it is manageable. We must move towards managing it better than we are. It cannot be that we just leave our human beings to fend for themselves. Kind of like, what is this, like Hunger Games? No, we have to do better than that.
And Mr. G, if I may add as well, Dr. Triphi and everybody else has been spot on with this discussion. But the one thing I want to make sure that we say outright and we are absolutely clear on to the women and anybody who's being abused, it is not your fault, right?
Never.
There's nothing you could say or do if you go as far as deciding, you know what, today I feel like walking outside tutuni as my mother made me. If a man is not an abuser, he is not going to abuse you. Because let us look at this historically, right? When, let's say, before the 1970s, where most women were dependent on men financially, there were abusers because men had the power, men had the control, right?
Exactly.
Fast forward to now, where women have fought for the rights to be in the workplace, have fought for the rights to be independent, they're still abusers because now these same men are now jealous that these women have found financial independence. So I just want to make it absolutely crystal clear to anyone out there who's listening that first, it is not your fault. And second of all, you cannot fix the person. You cannot love them out of being an abuser. You cannot tiptoe enough around them to stop them from being an abuser. You cannot change your language, your demeanor, the fact that you're isolated from all your family and all your friends to stop him from being an abuser, because by nature, that is who he is. And I just want to make sure we talk about the impact of toxic masculinity, because as we see each one of our panel members alluding to, this is the stem of the problem. So we have where we talk about, traditionally, and Nurse Sanford said it, traditionally men have felt the need culturally to be the head of the household. And like Dr. Triphi said, there's nothing wrong with that. But if it is only serving your purposes, that is a problem, right? So men have been taught to be strong emotionally. Men have also been taught dominance. Men should be in positions of power, and this earns him respect. This toxic masculinity has led to anti-feminine concepts of men. Men shouldn't possess traits that are traditionally considered to be feminine, such as asking for help or showing emotion. Men should not display emotion, being physically, emotionally aggressive, being sexually promiscuous. That is all what toxic masculinity is feeding to our children, right? Men should not engage in activities traditionally viewed as feminine. So no housework. Oh, forget about changing diapers, especially poopy diapers. Oh, no. That is woman's work, right? So we can already see how this creates tension in a relationship, because those men who have been trained, and I'm not going to say all men, because God knows there's some great men out there who, despite any circumstance, whether they're stressed, whether they're unemployed, whether they feel the woman is being disrespectful, they're not taking care of their children, they're not abusive. So let us not just use a broad brush and say that all men are the same. But for the abusers, where is that socialization coming from? Because if we are talking about solutions, we have to look at the core of the problem. So where is that socialization stemming from? Is it within our families, where we as mothers say to our young boys, boy, you too Shia, right? We know that word. You too Shia, man up. Everything for you crying like a baby. Boys are not allowed to express their emotions. So they internalize it. And then we teach them that, if Mr. Push you, push him back. We teach them aggressive. The fact that in 2023, we are still using corporal punishment, we're still whipping our children. What that is teaching them is it's teaching them that violence is okay. And then we are stunned and we are surprised when they practice what they learn. If we are teaching them by us using physical violence on them that violence is okay, why are we surprised when they turn around? Because we have not taught them how to use their words to express themselves, use their words to express their frustrations, their anger, their rage. When we have taught them that, you know what, when I get angry, I'm just going to whoop you. Why are we surprised when they turn around? Because they have not been taught a different way that they use violence. So I just want to make it crystal clear and just to relate to what Dr. Triphi said as well, because she was spot on in terms of, and we saw it in the murder of Avenel, that mental health, we have to keep coming back to that topic. Because if you will recall, the man who was the murderer of Avenel Charles, his father committed suicide. So what is that saying to us? All the information is out there for us to dissect, Mr. G and everyone. All the information is out there. We just have to stop, pay attention, and analyze what is going on. His father committed suicide, right? And another thing we found out, which is spot on what Dr. Triphi said, was that when there was another man present, he would back down. He would back down. Because again, control and power. When Avenel was all by herself, he could bully her. He could intimidate her. He could, be aggressive with her. But as soon as another man was present, he would back down. So what is that telling us? That in the meantime, where we don't have the systems that we need, we don't have anything in place to protect our women, maybe something as simple as if you're in a potentially dangerous situation, you simply ask a male relative to accompany you so that at least this abuser can see that you come with strength. And maybe we will find solutions, long-term solutions along the way. But in the interim, to avoid another murder of another woman in Dominica, maybe we can look at more immediate solutions. So I just thought I would add that in, Mr. G.
Yeah, well, and thank you for adding that. We want to take a little break here before we go back to Anette and Empress. We want to take a little break and ask Lambi to maybe open the lines, give the numbers, and we can ask our listeners if they'd like to make a call. Now is the time to do that. And when we come back, I would also ask Simone, if you could please acknowledge all our folks who are listening to us on Facebook and on YouTube and following us. We really want to welcome them, acknowledge them. Lambi, then give the telephone numbers. Let's see if we can take a couple of calls.
The Global View and Q, the numbers are for calling in as follows: 449-3095, 449-3096, 449-3097, 616-4257, 305-432-9624, and we will take your calls as you call. Go ahead, Mr. G.
Yeah, and thanks a lot. Just interrupt us anytime that the calls start coming, Lambi. You have a call already? Let's take it. All right, so you'll just interrupt us as the calls come in. I wanted to just, before I move on to Empress, I noted that that when somebody mentioned about men not liking to change diapers, I thought I saw Anette reacting. So maybe she might want to share something with us when we come back to her. But Empress, I want to go back to you now, because you can see the conversation is really very, very interesting, very in-depth, and the level of professionalism that I see coming out of this discussion. I mean, it's something that we don't see very often, and I'm delighted, in fact, to be a part of this conversation. But let's go over to you for your further contribution.
listening both to, Dr. Matthew and Dr. Wallace, and probably just, you see me nodding my head and nodding my head because it's just right, so much on point. Because like one, we learn hurt people hurt people. And another thing is we parent the way we were parented. So there goes that cycle that just keeps on, So you say, my mother spanked me, when I did wrong. So I spank my children. Or if you have someone who's going through their own issue, that's all they know. And if they have not seek help for that issue prior, of course, it is going to come out in their relationship. When you look at, even looking at my abuser and learning certain things about him, he was also abused as a child. But in many ways, a lot of men are taught to, like the doctor was saying, to keep those emotions. You don't express those emotions. So what have many men learn is to be aggressive. To be aggressive. Anyone who comes towards you, you feel like you need to fight the whole world. I have to fight them. I have to put my fists up. I have to treat them the way they treat me, or I have to hurt them before they hurt me. So that's part of it. And you have to say, so you have to look at things on so many levels, just like therapy. When I went through a previous abusive relationship, I believe in having therapy. It's like coming down here to Dominica and you hear a lot of people say, oh, that person is paro, and I had to ask, well, what is paro? It's, oh, that person is crazy. But many times people need help. And I've seen that in the society here, a lot of mental issues goes unresolved because we look at it as that person have a problem or they're crazy, instead of saying that person is a call for help. It's a call for help, and having, systems like we speak about, systems in place to help those people who can go to a therapist, who can go to a doctor, because sometimes they may need therapy as far as speaking to someone, and there are people who may need medication, and it says every case is different. There's someone, depends on the level, because as we said, every case is different. It might be someone who's sexually abusing you, and that perpetrator may need to go to a sex therapist, may need help for that. Financially, there are probably 7 different aspects of abuse. And we have to learn in society, to have these systems in place to help the individuals, the abuser and the abusive person, and the perpetrator and the victims.
And I think we have a call coming in.
Do we have a call? Okay.
Good evening, caller. Thanks for joining us. Go ahead, please. The caller has left.
Okay. And another part, and I say we didn't touch much, and coming from the criminal justice system. Yes.
Caller, I noticed you're back. Please go ahead. Please go ahead, caller.
Hello. Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening to the panelists, Happy New Year to everybody, especially Mr. G, Keep up the good work. I just post the comment there, on the show. But these guys just spend money on a lot of CO parties. So what about shelters for women? Mr. Skerritt, please make some shelters for women, abused women. Mr. Skerritt, please, there's lots of domestic violence in Dominica, and crime and homicide, unemployment. What are you doing for the country, sir? 20 years, sir. You just sit down and nothing, and crime is unemployment and nothing for the country. Anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot for your contribution.
Yeah. So as I continue, another part dealing with the system, the criminal justice system, and a lot of times, and I can speak from experience, here's an issue, whereas the police sometimes do not take, like, the previous panel was saying, take it as serious. So as a woman going through a death abuse from someone, you go to the necessary places, whether it's going to the police and then going to the court system. So you go to the police, even during my own incident, the police never arrested the person. The police sent me to the hospital. I went through all of that. The person is there. The person was never got arrested. So they believe that it's okay to do what they do. There's another aspect of it where CID was brought in, where if you're back in the States, what was committed through telecommunication or online, or that would probably have put that person in jail for 10 to 15 years. And what they said to me at CID, we're going to have a conversation with the person. Or another thing was they tell you they're going to have a confrontation. At what point do you sit down with your abuser or someone who have assaulted you and said, I am going to have a confrontation? It's just re-abusing the person. Again, traumatizing the person. And I said to them, there is no way I am going to sit down right next to that person who have just abused me and sit to have a confrontation with that person. You go to the court system and it's been 6 months and you go to court and everything is adjourned and adjourned and adjourned. Nothing has been done. You go to get an order of protection, and there are times that where they may have the order of protection, because I know New York State law. I don't know Dominica law as much as, but I said most things across the board are the same when it comes to certain situations. So when you have a temporary order of protection, when you go to court, you get a temporary order of protection. The temporary order of protection is good for a certain amount of time. So whether it may be 2 months, 3 months until you go back to court, that's a temporary order of protection, where it will eventually lead to a permanent order of protection. You go to the system here, to go to the court here, and you get the temporary order of protection. That person may violate that same order, because when you get to someone with a whole narcissistic personality or think that I can do whatever I want, because I had a situation, I live in a gated where I have the burglar bars. That person jumps through my burglar bars and says, I just wanted you to know I wasn't going to hurt you, but I have access to you. So I can get to you if I want to. So there's creating that fear. And we talk about why people don't leave or why they go back, is creating that fear in you to say, I'm not going to hurt you. But psychologically, they have you to a point of saying that I can get to you if I want. So whatever you may do, you can't get away, because if I want to kill you, I would have killed you. So how are you supposed to, you call the police says, well, they didn't hurt you. They didn't hurt you. So what does it take for them to hurt you and then for them to do something about it? So now that they have let the temporary order of protection lapse, the system says to you, well, in order for you to get another one, the person have to re-offend you, for them to now have to commit something new, for them now to issue you another temporary order of protection. So what happens? The females get frustrated, or the abusive person gets frustrated, says, you know what, first of all, if you're working, you have to leave work to go, to the court every time. So they said, you know what, I've had it, I'm tired, I don't want to go back to court. Obviously, the court system is not doing anything about it. So what do? Like how I feel. I'm going to drop the case. So what happens now? That perpetrator is left to go back and abuse someone else.
You have a call, Lambi?
Yes.
Sorry about that.
That's
Let's
okay.
take a call.
Good evening, caller. Thanks for joining us. Go ahead, please.
Good night.
Good evening.
Good evening. All what Miss Empress have been talking to, she has spoke all that to me. I guess you could pick up my voice. If she don't know, just tell her my twin side that calling. Because at that time she will mention certain things. She mentioned about the burglar bar. And the following time it had a lot of wind. So she was discussing to the same guy that come and abuse her. And that so much wind. Before I never come out there, But the day he come there, before I come out there, I guess you can remember what I call him. The twin side brother.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. Listen,
I call in there because the program we had the last time, I tried to get through, I never get through.
Right.
okay.
Thank
Speaking
you.
to you?
Yes, I do.
Huh?
Yes, I do.
And my brother tell you my situation.
Yes, I'm glad you're doing better.
Okay, then right now there, they discharged me. And right now there, since on the 23rd, I passed in blood and I just waiting to see if I can travel to Barbados, Trinidad, Cuba, Martinique and Guadeloupe. That's the answer. Up now I can't get no result. I just there by my brother's son. You know?
Yes. I pray for healing for you.
True.
Yes.
Thank you. So you remember when you was mentioned on the flower, the cover to the wind, can remember that?
Yes. Yes.
You spoke to me about it, and it was
Yes.
really true.
Yes.
And I directly concerning. I see the car passing by me all the time, but I didn't know. I tell you the call of the car. Remember all that?
Yes. Yes, I do.
Yeah, well,
That is
we want to thank the caller for sharing. I mean,
yes.
it's good.
And that is the thing as a community, because like they say, if you see something, say something.
Well, let's maybe take one more call, Lambi.
Mhm.
Good evening, caller. Please go ahead.
You hear me?
Yes, loud and clear. Go ahead.
Mr. J,
Yes, how you doing?
you remember in the 50s when you was going to school, you have three brothers, one man here. The one cardiac chopped the lady, the matron from the prison.
Right.
You do remember that?
It's a little bit vague, but it sounds like something that may have happened.
Yeah, he was going to school. He was going to Olympic school at the time.
Yes.
And then Margella showed the woman as the nurse, Julia's correct mother.
Ah, okay. Okay.
Remember that?
It's coming back to me vaguely, yes.
Yes, and a woman they called Miss Lynn. What Oscar? Put on the right in that police station here.
But so you can see this thing has been happening for quite some time.
Thank you, caller.
Really, that's what he's saying. It's a pity that I hate to have to end this segment, I mean, you can see there's so much information here. Obviously, you're free to hang in with us for a little while long, but I have to let you know that I expect 3 other guests to join us. I mean, Dr. Irving Andre, Justice Dr. Irving Andre, is going to be logging in shortly to join us, and Simeon Joseph, who's a social scientist, expects to join us as well, and also Monsignor William John Lewis is expected to join us to continue the conversation, because this thing is so important. It has to go on, and it must go on. And I'm hoping that Empress will take me on when we talk about doing some of those debates, because we have to have that discussion in the form of debates, pros and cons, and so on.
Absolutely.
So really and truly, what I'm saying is I'm letting Justice Dr. Irving Andre, Monsignor John Lewis told me that he would join us about 8:30 because he had some other engagements, and I know that Justice Irving Andre is standing by to log in to join us, and also Simeon Joseph standing by to log in to join us. So I hope Sherwin can be in touch with them if they need any assistance to help them to log in and be with us tonight. But I just want to, as we try to wrap this segment, before we do, sort of your little parting words, except that if you want to stay on, you're free to stay on. But if you wanted to sort of wrap up, Dr. Simone, first of all, I would like to ask you to acknowledge, please, some of our people on Facebook who has been with us and making some wonderful comments.
Yes. So thank you to the Facebook and YouTube Live audience for being here. If you would like to join the conversation on YouTube and Facebook, you can do so at Q95 FM Radio. Again, Q95 FM Radio is where we are on Facebook and YouTube. So we say good evening, David Joseph. It is always wonderful to have you on board. Clarilyn Warrington, let me apologize for calling you Washington before. Clarilyn Warrington, thank you for being here. Teresa Susanna Roll. David Joseph says, I believe that one of the contributing factors to the continued abuse and brutalization of our women is the deafening silence of our women. Similarly, the abuse of our young girls. Way too many women are silent on the matters. My mom, Medina Seno, says, blessed evening to all listening. Thank you for being here, Mom. Shara, Tiana Georges, Empress. Okay, she's just calling you out. Juanita is here with us. Desmond is here with us. Inez Williams, Crystal. Thank you so much for being here, Tina. David continues. We also need more people advocating on behalf of abused and battered women. Didi Esther, great to see you. Good evening, Mr. G and the rest of the panelists. Special shout out to Lambert Charles on the console. Thank you. Chai Lee, violence against women is a very broad issue and should not be watered down by our men. Our men get abused too, absolutely. Same way child abuse is an issue, separate and distinct from adult issues. Let's see who else we have. Thank you guys for being here. Kimberly Rice, nice to see you. Gregory Anton, family background check is very important when you're dating. Maslin Edwards, great to see you. Good evening and Happy New Year to the panel and the audience. Let's see who else is making a contribution here. Greg Baptist, good evening, guys. Good program. This government spends too much money on CO. This guy's modest is winning. Their motive is winning an election so they can enrich themselves, and the country goes to hell in a handbasket. Bernard Benjamin, nice to see you. Well said, Dr. Matthew, because I'm sitting here as a man cringing. Cleo Michael, nice to see you. Carl Kofi James, greetings to the entire panel. And let's see who else we have. So Carl says, one of the problems with the way some of our men see their role as leader of the household stems from the exclusion of women from even the biblical indoctrination. We have been cultured against the significance and balance of women. So lots of great contributions coming in, Mr. G, and we will take some comments later in the program.
Yeah, certainly appreciate that. I see that Simeon Joseph has joined us already, and I really want to welcome Simeon, and we expect Dr. Irving Andre to join us very shortly. And sometime after 8:30, we expect Monsignor William John Lewis to join us.
I believe he's on, Mr. G. I can see him.
That is Monsignor Lewis.
Hi, Monsignor.
Hi, Monsignor.
The thing is,
I had to complete my class and close up and everything. And I've just now come on. Hello, everyone. Good evening.
Well, you see my problem. You're looking so young that I took you for a young.
This is what 75 looks like.
Oh, no.
God be the glory.
Stop it.
All right. Well, welcome to the club then.
Thank you. Indeed.
All right. So, well, I just wanted to give the ladies an opportunity. If any of you have to leave and you wanted to, Annette said she might want to leave us. So, Annette, I don't know whether you want to just sort of make some parting remarks.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Gregoire.
Yes.
I have to leave, as you said, because of the baby. But it's a very fruitful discussion. I believe it's very relevant right now, given what's happening in Dominica. Over the past few years, we in the territory have had 5 murders of women by their partners. 5 women, and I believe for a minority population, that 5 is way too much, and it is time that we women stand up. Across Dominica, there are women being battered even now. If you are alive, you're a survivor. So I wouldn't want you to be a victim, because victims are the people who get murdered. So if you're a survivor and you are able to get out of the situation, now is the time that you have to do something about it. Get the courage that you need, get the help that you need, get the assistance that you need, and get out. I would just like to close by reiterating some of my recommendations, those that I made during my last presentation in Parliament. 1, to strengthen our mental health system. The mental health department need the human resource to be able to function effectively, as well as the Bureau of Gender Affairs. They too need the human resource and the financial resources to be able to function effectively. Also, at the schools, if you notice, a lot of the schools right now have a majority of female teachers. I think there's a problem. The school that my children goes to, for example, in the Atkinson Primary School, we only have 1 male teacher. And if we really want to help in socializing our boys to become better men, I think we would need more role models at the schools to be able to educate them and teach them. Also, I would believe that even in our healthcare system, we are lacking in so many areas. General healthcare system, it's deteriorating. That's deteriorated over the years. Yes, we have had these wonderful structures being erected, but the care for the people is not there. And of course, like most of the women mentioned, we need a safe house for our women. We need somewhere that our women can go to in the event that they are enduring this abuse. So And one last thing, of course, the family court. We need a family court in Dominica. Like Empress mentioned, the court time, it's prolonged. It's too long. People are having to wait too long to be able to get justice for the crimes that are committed against them. And we need to be able to do that. In the police force, given the many excuses that the police are making, I think that a module on mental health can be added to the training that the police receive. So they'd better be able to deal with mental health patients when they go to them, and better be able to restrain them, because we see a lot of violence against these individuals when the police go to restrain them. And there are certain training and skills that they can learn to be able to better deal with these people. All right, so I just want to also let the general public know that we're having a vigil for Velma Valmon on Saturday. It's organized by Miranda Langley and a group of women within the territory. So we'll be having it up at Cynic on Saturday, and we're encouraging everybody who can make it to join us. And we are hoping to start a movement to create a greater awareness of violence against women within the territory, and it's beginning with this vigil on Saturday. So thank you, Mr. Gregoire, for having me on this panel tonight, and to be with these wonderful ladies. It was a pleasure discussing and sharing information with you all.
Well, thank you so much for
Same here. Thank you
your
so much.
presence and for your very valuable inputs, and of course to express our condolences to you on the passing and the brutal death of your cousin. She was so young. She had so much more life ahead of her, so much more that she could have done and accomplished, so much good she could have done in life. She spent a lot of time studying and trying to make herself an independent person, and there it is. That's what has happened. So we regret this, and we express our condolences. I'm sure from everyone here on the panel and everyone in Dominica.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Anette. Thanks a lot. We'll see you another time.
Goodbye.
And
yes, we also.
If I could just add, just actually before I leave, also, just something I just wanted to add to that before I leave, to say, what do you do if you're in an abusive relationship and you need to leave? So to all the people who are out there who are in an abusive relationship, yet there has to be some aspect of how do you get out. So it says, create a plan, right? Create your plan. Call 911. Go to the hospital, see your doctor, tell someone, have a getaway bag. Like when a woman is pregnant, she has that bag of what she needs to take to the hospital. Well, in the same way, if you're in an abusive relationship, you should have a getaway bag somewhere packed, somewhere where your abuser doesn't know about it or doesn't know what's in the bag. Make sure you have IDs. Make sure you have some cash. Make sure you have all your medical papers, your children's medical papers, your passport. Excuse me, your passport, because those are some things that your abuser will try to take away from you so you don't leave. So make sure you have your passport in a safe place. You have some comfortable clothes. So it's your getaway bag. Make sure you have your documents, your medication, and some telephone numbers that you need to call, or someone that you need to call. So when you have made that decision that you want to leave, someone safe that you can call and how to get out. And I just wanted to put that out so just people have an idea of what to do, because you're always at that situation. Well, what am I going to do? You can't just run out the house and then you're per se left to, well, what do I do now? So you should really have that. If you can, start thinking about it, start putting your plan together, start having your bag, all your documents together. So when you leave, you don't have to think you have to go back to the house, or you don't have your identification, or you don't have your medication, or whatever you may need. So I just wanted to add that to the piece.
And thank you so much, Empress. And if you have to leave us now, we understand. But really, your contribution tonight was really valuable. We really appreciate it. I'm sure that's not the last you will be hearing from us, or we will be hearing from you. Because as I said, I intend to take you on in the question of trying to develop those debates about those issues. Debates.
Yes. Oh, just let me know when.
Yeah, I know that Miss Judy Christian, if she's listening, and so she has been very involved in looking at debates for the schools. I think these are issues that these kids can debate, especially the boys, right?
Healthy debates.
healthy debates to see how they can find a way to solve their problems without resorting to violence. Find another way to do this. So thank you so much. I just want to just welcome they join us now, Justice Dr. Irving Andre. He's with us. And Monsignor John Lewis is also with us. A little earlier on, I took him for a much younger person. I have to apologize for that. But he told me that age is just a number. So I understand that. And then, of course, Simeon Joseph is with us, no stranger to anyone. Gentlemen, I want to start off first with Justice Dr. Irving Andre. I know that you are very concerned about this matter. I know that sometimes in your own work you're confronted and you have to deal with matters like that. These are always uncomfortable matters for us to deal with in our lives and in our work and so on. But it seems to me that our country is at a point now where it needs all of us to put all of our heads together, all of our ideas together, to try to come up with a solution. We cannot have our young women just dying at the hands of their intimate partners. This makes no sense. I mean, this is not something new. It has happened before, but I find the brutality of it. And as someone on the panel said earlier, what we saw in those both two cases in the last week of the year is that both of the perpetrators, one of them committed suicide and the other one attempted to commit suicide. So to me, this is very significant. Dr. Irving Andre, I wanted to go over to you.
Let me say good evening to the panelists, to your listeners this evening, obviously to Lambie and to Sherwin. I thank you for your service and your dedication to the cause of justice and trying to get some type of understanding as to what really is a systemic problem. Let me also commend the four earlier panelists for their contribution. They've identified numerous causes of this scourge, which continue, quite frankly, to blight Dominica. I will be taking a slightly different slant. I will not necessarily be looking at domestic violence per se. I will be trying to focus on what I perceive to be the fundamental underlying problem, which has caused this thing to proliferate. I think it's important that we do so. I think it's important that we identify measures that deal with the symptoms of the problem and measures that deal with the fundamental problem. But let me start by giving you a few anecdotal details, which in my view reflects the enormity of the problem. Let me start by indicating this. A minister pledges that he and his cabinet comrades support a colleague who allegedly beat his girlfriend to a point where she suffered a miscarriage. To add insult to injury, he wished she would simply have taken her life. Second, a political operative who received a $500,000 grant, which he has not repaid, described a poor single mother who asks for assistance as one of them kind of women there. Third, a government minister tells a class of young female students that to get ahead, they should shake their pamperland emno. Now, Monsignor, I must say that when I heard the word, I initially thought that pamperland was a new kind of pampers. But somebody told me, Andrew, you're wrong. That's fine. I can be wrong. Many of those denied a living wage in Dominica, historically and presently, have been homemakers, former banana carriers, teachers, and nurses. They are all disproportionately women. Men with multiple partners are peacocked as being the cream of the crop, epitomizing all that is good about manhood, while women with multiple partners are dismissed as prostitutes or promiscuous. All too frequently, women are treated as items of property to be abused and discarded at the whims and fancies of their partners. Hush money is often regarded as a way to escape criminal sanction rather than the basis for a charge of conspiracy to obstruct justice. Historically, Kalinago women have all too often been stereotyped as not being quote-unquote marriage material. In the past, women working in rich households who became impregnated by the rich sons of their employers have been described as having benefited, according to one writer called Jamaica Kincaid, from the honor of concubinage. Furthermore, single mothers with multiple children are summarily dismissed, in the words of Calypsonian Liana, as quote-unquote baby machines good for nothing, who lack the morally redeeming qualities of abstinence and chastity. Young women are invariably, by many, not all, but by many, regarded as the hooks of power. Domestic violence is still treated by law enforcement agents as a private matter. Women have historically and continue to be the ritualistic scapegoats for most, if not all, of the problems in relationships, and continue to pay, as the recent events have shown, with their lives, the fundamental cause of this persistent discrimination is not merely men's inability to control their anger or their lack of counseling, but the destructive effects of a patriarchal society, that is to say, one dominated by males, which historically has treated women as chattels, or personal possessions, or persons to be dominated or worse, destroyed. I don't believe I'm overstating the case. The evidence speaks for itself. The question of domestic violence is not a recent phenomenon. It has been with us for decades, and we therefore have an obligation to try to deal with the fundamental causes of it. I view this most recent phase of domestic violence as merely the latest manifestation of the power imbalances in a male-dominated society, which, despite significant gains by women over the past decades, continues to tolerate the worst effects of patriarchy and its relative misogyny. This sorry state of affairs can be traced to 400 years of slavery, where Black bodies were treated as items of property to be brutalized and killed at the whims and fancies of white slave owners, both male and female. Black women did not escape unscathed. They were exploited for their productive and reproductive potential. These patterns of exploitation continued in the decades following emancipation. Former slaves and their descendants continue to view their intimate partners as their property. My woman, not my partner. Just as the Bible has been manipulated by zealots who justify Black slaves, used it to justify Black slavery and apartheid, so too has it been used to justify the subjugation of women. Vague teachings that women was made from man, that the head of a wife is her husband, that women should be submissive to their husbands, have all added to the oppressive architecture that make women susceptible to interpartner violence. Those who use the Bible for these purposes ignore the teachings, for example, of Proverbs 31, subsection 10, or verse 10, that a wife is far more precious than jewels, or the instruction in Ephesians 5:25 that husbands should have rather than harm their wives, or the instruction in Peter 3 and 7 that husbands live with your wives in an understanding way, showing honor to the woman as the weaker vessel, since they are heirs with you of the grace of life. In the early decades of the 19th and 20th centuries, men dominated the discourse with respect to economics, politics, and the governance of Dominica. They dominated the struggle for representative government in the late 19th century and early 20th century. Indeed, it was only in 1940 that Elma Napier, English woman, became the first woman to gain a seat in Parliament. Phyllis Allfrey also came in 1955 and helped found the Dominican Labour Party. And in 1961, Mabel Moyle James became the first indigenous woman to be elected to the House of Assembly. We have to understand that since then, there has been a number of women who've qualified in various fields, who've participated in governance, but the sad reality is that they have oftentimes, and I guess one may point to Dame Eugenia Charles as an exception, they have played second fiddle to certainly those who hold the reins and control the reins of power. When Monel and women, quite frankly, have shown to a significant degree a greater affinity with associating with those who hold the reins of power than in fact providing a helping hand to their sistren. For example, when Monel Williams was castigated in the House of Assembly and subjected to a brutal and abusive sexist attack by a disciple of the government, women politicians and their comrades cheered feverishly. When women were abused, many self-appointed women advocates in senior positions turned their noses away. Not a single woman in the new administration has expressed any public outrage at the recent carnage with the senseless murder of the women that has formed the subject of this discussion. Now, the recent murder of the Calinado doctor confirms that even women who may not be financially dependent on their partner may become victims of violence. The female partner runs the risk of being victimized by the socially constructed roles of her male partner as the quote-unquote head of the household, the main breadwinner, or the provider. Suddenly, when confronted with this power imbalance, with his partner being the major breadwinner, he is no longer in control. He feels threatened. He becomes consumed by an emotional trauma over his perceived loss of status. His very manhood appears to be lost. He murderously lashes out in a vain attempt to exact revenge on someone who he believes had either betrayed him or taken away his self-respect. And so violence against women is just part of the deeply rooted power imbalances in our community. As a result, measures such as toughening criminal laws, providing shelters for battered women, and counseling for men only address the effects of the fundamental problem. No more effective than, for example, a kind of paracetamol used to temporarily relieve the pain of the malady which afflicts Dominica. The measures required are both short-term and long-term, but something must be done. In the short term, we can do the following if we have the political will to do it. A, change the mindset of many law enforcement agents that complaints about domestic violence must be taken seriously before they reach crisis proportions resulting in death or serious injury. B, establish, if there is not one already, a domestic assault unit in the local police force, working in tandem with the Women's Crisis Center to deal proactively with complaints about domestic violence rather than reactively. C, is it? Educate police agents about the law to change a mindset that violence against women by their partners is a criminal rather than a private matter. D, review and revise rules of evidence such that when an alleged victim of domestic violence decides not to testify in the ensuing trial, the original statement taken under circumstances that vouches for its trustworthiness can be used to prosecute the alleged offender. E, create an independent police service which will not countenance any political interference in the enforcement of law and order. F, educate law enforcement agents that when a 14-year-old is solicited for sexual favors by a political operative, instead of hiding behind the claim that, quote unquote, "il pas touché," they should apply the law irrespective of his political affinities. But the issue of domestic violence requires more systemic solutions than these measures. Economic empowerment of them kind of women there will make it more likely for them to leave an abusive relationship than if they are economically dependent on their abuser. Having an independent tribunal or body to make decisions regarding women who should receive state assistance will eliminate their vulnerability from government operatives seeking a close encounter of an intimate kind in exchange for financial help. Teaching and nurturing women from school age to die with their dignity, in the words of singing Sandra, rather than complying with a request from a senior official for him to take out a blackhead on her belly in exchange for money, a job, or a scholarship. Furthermore, similarly, boys should be nurtured from an early age that manhood is not defined by domination or subjugation, or by keeping members of the opposite sex, quote unquote, in their place, but by fostering equal partnerships and mutual respect. Also, change in relationships is the norm. They should be taught that change in relationships is the norm rather than the exception, and that all partners have a right to respond to such change. But most of all, women should not be passive bystanders or meekly acquiesce in their systemic subjugation, but must play an active role to change, in the words of poet Omar Khayyam, this sorry state of things entire. In Iran, in Bangladesh, in India, in the USA, right here in Dominica on Wednesdays, women have joined forces with other justice-seeking partners to bring meaning and teeth to constitutionally protected rights of equality and equal opportunity, human dignity, and the right to be free from violence. Many have done so at great expense and sacrifice. Many have achieved success in their efforts to do away with entrenched inequalities, exclusion, and discrimination. And so the focus cannot merely be on domestic violence. The fight is much broader. It is one which should be motivated by the immemorial lyrics of Jimmy Cliff, quote, "You can get it if you really want, but you must try, 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 and you will succeed at last." Thank you.
And thank you, Justice Dr. Irving Andre. You certainly said a mouthful. There are a lot to ponder on. A lot of that is some of what was said earlier by these distinguished ladies is incorporated in much of what you've said, but you have a lot of new suggestions and solutions. I wanted to go over to Monsignor William John Lewis. I noticed that Dr. Irving Andre, Monsignor, he mentioned it, other quotes from the Bible. I don't know.
I saw that as well. Yes, good evening, everyone, and thanks for having me on this program. Yes, I listened very attentively and with great interest to Dr. Andre. And I said, you know, he's touching on all the points that I thought I might consider. But one of the things that you mentioned, Dr. Andre, that I do want to reiterate is the inappropriate use of the Bible, the Word of God. Actually, it's an abuse of the Word of God, that selected verses are taken to highlight, if you want, and to say that the Bible speaks about women in a negative way, especially in terms of wives being submissive to your husbands and that sort of thing. That they take that part, but they don't read the rest that says, husbands, treat your wives with respect. And even going as far as saying, as Christ loves the church. And you know what Christ did for the church? Christ died for the church. So it goes both ways. But of course, when one has a certain mindset, one can use anything to present what they want to present. And that is what is being done constantly. When Christ came, you know, he was there for everyone. All the scriptures speak about the salvation is for all, for Jews and Greeks, for men and women. And especially the Gospel of Luke, women are highlighted in a way that none of the other Gospels does it, to show, again, the importance of women in the life of the people and the life of the church. And to say nothing about the dignity, the basic dignity that each person has, which is something that the church is always promoting and always talking about, the innate dignity of the human person. That is something that is God-given. No one can take it. And a woman has the same dignity as any man, as a child of God. But you see, the difficulty, I think, comes when one loses focus and when there's a society that encourages this patriarchal attitude that Dr. Andre referred to, that somehow the man is macho and the woman has to submit. The society is one that promotes that. And even in terms of the training of our children, and Dr. Andre alluded to that as well, that the boys can do whatever they want. They can be boys, as it were, but the ladies have to sort of control themselves. What are you teaching the children? That there is this imbalance between the way that you live your life as a man, as opposed to the way that the girl lives her life. Thank God that in our society and so many others, many women have become so prominent, and they become the breadwinner in the home rather than the man, and that too becomes a problem. That too becomes a problem where the man feels that he's being emasculated because he's not the one providing, but she's quite good at it. And what the church teaches always in terms of marriage is there's a partnership. It's never one walking in front of the other. It's never one being subservient to the other, but rather we go together hand in hand. And whoever does whatever job better in the family, let them do it. But no, our society thinks differently. Plus, of course, the fact that morality seems to have gone out of the window. When I preached, and I preached on the evening of the New Year's evening, it was just fresh in my head, these two murders that we had back to back. And I asked the question, what have we done? What have we done as a society that somehow someone can think women are things to be used, abused, and thrown away? And I was referring particularly to those two incidents, but there have been so many others. As you mentioned, Dr. Andre, domestic violence is nothing new, but it keeps showing its head over and over again. And somehow enough is not being done about it. We talk a lot. And when it happens, we say, hélas, pauvre petit. But that is not enough. That is not enough. In these two particular incidents, the perpetrators, one committed suicide and the other tried to take his life. But whether they lived or not, the fact is, where was the outcry? I didn't hear it from my sisters. I was hoping that all the women in Dominica would have taken to the streets and protested. Nothing was done. Nothing was done. It's still not too late. But these are the things, these are the actions that every woman on the island should have gotten up and said, we will not take this anymore. Enough is enough. And that wasn't done. And I'm glad, Dr. Andre, also you alluded to the fact that in the House of Assembly, when these women are vilified, the other women applaud. What kind of foolishness is this? The other women applaud. What does that say about yourself? Or is it that you have been so well treated that you feel that somehow nothing can happen to you? It can happen to you as well. So these are all the things that, in a sense, cause me tremendous pain, you know, as a priest, as someone who has to speak to the people of God, referring to the scriptures, referring to the morality that is supposed to be there, referring to all that I know that is good and proper for any one individual, man, woman, or child in our society. When I spoke, excuse me, when I spoke that evening at the mass, I mentioned the fact that, and Dr. Andre, again, you referred to the pampalam thing, that, you know, our little children, how do we treat our girl children, the students at the school? I mentioned that, for example, there are countries where you have this thing of sex for grades. I said, thank God it's not happening here. And I said it tongue in cheek, because maybe it is happening here. You know, how do we groom? There are so many men who groom the little girls, who groom them, offer them things and so forth. I mentioned the fact, for example, that there are men who are older than the girls at school who will sort of take them in and pretend to offer them their books and that, but next thing they know, they're pregnant as well. What are we saying? We're closing eyes to all these things. So all these are some of the things that really bother me, that really pain me. And yes, it's true that, okay, the church speaks, but when I think of church, it's not just the priest and the bishop, it's all of us. We are church. When I spoke on Midnight Mass for Christmas, I encourage us to speak to your government. You put them there. You have them, and they should be there to attend to your needs. They're not doing you a favor by doing what they are supposed to do. The question is, have our people come to the understanding that we have the power to change things? That when these things happen to our women, that we have the power to speak, but not to speak, but to act as well, and to demand, to make demands, that this sort of action never happens again. You know, I was in South Africa over the summer holidays in July, and one of the places I visited, of course, was Robben Island, where Mandela spent 17 years incarceration. And one of the things he said is, we forgive, but we will never forget. And the point he was making is, in terms of apartheid, we can never forget what happened. And although we forgive those that have done this to us, we will never forget, because we don't want it ever to happen again. And we have to say that here as well. We forgive, but we cannot forget. It has to remain there in our memory. We cannot pretend to have Alzheimer's or dementia. It has happened enough. The time has come for us to say, enough is enough. I will stop for a moment.
For your opening remarks there, Monsignor John Lewis. I really am really grateful for those remarks coming from you. It's really sort of a breath of fresh air to hear those kind of remarks coming from you. And I know that Simeon will have some more comments to make on that. And I'm pretty sure as we go along, maybe we can all discuss, is there a greater role that the church can play in bringing families together to provide that kind of education, to change the mindset that exists in our men and women, the precepts that are there. And because, Dr. Andre, I wanted to go back to you to sort of make a further respond a little bit to some of what Monsignor John Lewis said, because, you know, I don't know whether you were listening, but before Miss Anette Sanford left us here tonight, remember, she was actually a parliamentarian. She was in the parliament, and she was subjected to abuse by her fellow parliamentarians on the other side of the aisle. And she gave testimony to that tonight. And what she said to us, the women on the other side applauded with the men. Your thoughts, Dr. Andrew?
It is obviously a sad state of affairs, let's put it that way. And it means that growth is not only a phenomenon that men have to address, but also women. The question is, how do they rein in their power if they cannot break common bread with their own sistren, let's put it that way. Let me, before I continue, commend Monsignor John Lewis. I am probably biased because I've known the gentleman for over 40 years. I taught at the St. Mary's Academy 2 short periods of time in and out of university. And I can indicate to you, I'm not saying that he is a good priest. He is a very good priest, but I'm saying that he's a good man, because that is more important than being a good priest. He's someone who has been an advocate for honesty, dignity, and human decency. And he continues to be one of those folks and so on. And he has certainly understood through his sermons on the Mount, if I may phrase it thusly, that the church has an important role to play. I certainly hope that his fellow ministers or religious leaders share his views on this issue. it seems to me that the church does have a strong role to play. And I hope that that role continues. I hope there can probably be some initiative with respect to something regarding national conciliation. It is not something which will solve this problem overnight. Nothing will. But every journey begins with a step. Every journey begins with committed persons. And I take faith because even with respect to the walks on Wednesdays, as far as I can tell, it is Dominican women, not Dominican women who have been red carpeted from birth to grave, but so-called ordinary Dominican. They're not ordinary in any sense because they have significant moral capital, much more than their economic capital. And yet they're there, marching for justice, marching for the rule of law. And I think that is something the church can play a role with. I will leave it to the leadership of the church to decide how they would play that role. But I take courage in the fact that the church has recognized that they have a role to play, and that we have to commend Monsignor Journalist, because we know anecdotally that he's fighting an uphill battle. But as the good book says, what does it say? We fight not, what does it say again, Brother John, Father Journalist? Monsignor, we fight not.
We're not fighting flesh and blood, but
flesh and blood,
the
but
principalities in high
and
places.
so on. So the fight is for a much greater cause than our individual selves. We are fighting for the redemption of our society. And I take confidence in the fact that their leaders, despite the fact that things may seem hopeless, they are leaders who are prepared to add ventilation and to fan the flames of justice in Dominica. Thank you.
And Simeon, Joseph, you look almost as pleased and delighted as I look and that I feel when I listen to these illustrious contributions on this topic here tonight. I mean, I was fascinated by the contributions of our four guests, Dr. Simone Mathieu, Anette Sanford, Dr. Wallace, and Empress. I remember that name, Empress. This is a name you'll be hearing a lot more of. And then on top of that, to add, the cream on top of all of that, we hear from Dr. Irving Andre and well, I don't want to call him doctor because I would say Monsignor William John Lewis. But it was so important that Dr. Andre said he did not only see him as a very good priest, but he saw him as a very good man. That is so important. Very, very important distinction. Simeon, just to express your further delight, as I'm trying to express mine, but I don't have the words that you have. I want to give you a chance to make a contribution to the discussion there. Are you muted? You might want to unmute so that we can hear you.
Intently to the entire, I was listening so intently to the entire discussion that I'm just amused. Actually, I feel so privileged to be part of the panel tonight, not just because it's on the radio, but some of the people on the program tonight I hold very dear to my heart in many, many, many ways. I just cannot describe. So I just like to gently say good night to Simone. Good to be there with you. I mean, Dr. Andre, I admire you so much. And of course, Father John Lewis. We serve in many capacities together. Father John Lewis, I must tell you, has been a pillar of strength, spiritual strength and guidance to me over the years. I can certainly attribute a lot of my inner emotional stability and strength to Father John. He has been there for me in my moments of questioning, my moments of doubt, my moments of disappointment. And I'm very happy to know that. And Irving Andre has said it right. He's a good man. He's a good man, inherently so, no doubt about that. So Father John, it's nice tonight on the program. So Let me just say, Sheridan, that
And I don't want you to forget that also with us. We still have with us Dr. Wallace.
I was going to that. I was going to that. You took this. You took the wind out of my sail.
All right,
I was going to
take it back, baby.
I was going to say. Let me just say, Sheridan, that I'm happy to also be part of a panel with Dr. Wallace, because I follow you regularly on Facebook, and I'm always pleased to sit down and listen to what you have to say. And of course, Empress, that name to me is what every woman should embody, because every woman is an empress, you know. And it's nice to be with them tonight. So I'm very happy that we're discussing this this topic tonight with such distinguished people, you know. Everyone whom I have the utmost respect for in my life, and because of what they do and what they stand for. And these are people I could say akin to my own heart, so to speak, you know. But let me just say that in light of the discussion that we're talking about tonight, my main area of concern is that I feel sad for Dominica in many areas, but most particularly because I think we have reached a stage in Dominica where we seem to have lost respect for life. And everything that encapsulates respect for life, you know, and I always want to juxtapose it to the fact that Dominica is often referred to as the Garden of Eden of the Caribbean. So it's supposed to be a little heaven. On top of it, we're not just called Dominica; it's the land of the Lord, and it's called the Commonwealth of Dominica. And when we went to independence in 1978, we took that word Commonwealth because the objective was that we continue to coexist with each other. We continue to work together, that Dominica did not belong to one set of people, or that some people should have more rights or privileges over others. And so today, when you think of that and you think of what Dominica has become in sense of the level of disrespect for life in all its forms, we're discussing abuse tonight, but I would say abuse of women tonight, but I would say quite candidly, I think we have lost, we have reached a stage where we are basically a nation riddled with abuse. There is political abuse, there is economic abuse, there is technological abuse, there is child abuse, you know, and there is abuse of power in all its magnitudes. There's abuse of economic privilege, you know, there's abuse of power, because the criminologists and Dr. Empresses, they will tell you, or even the psychologists tell you, abuse is about power. Abuse is always about power by those who think that because they have a certain level of position or dominance, that they can take advantage of the other. And that happens in many ways in Dominica. When you think of the fact that we've had so many murders, and yes, women were killed on the last day of the year and on the first day of the year. What does that say about us? And not only that, if we had any conscience about the season that we were in, it was the season where we were anticipating or just celebrating the celebration of the Christ child. Now, in scripture, we are told that Jesus said, I have come that you may have life and have it more abundantly. And that's what the Christmas celebration is supposed to be about. The celebration of the ushering of the author of life. And so what happened is we had these gruesome murders by two, I would say, very prominent women. A farmer, you know, a farmer, a woman who would get up. And when I listened to the story of her cousin saying that she would get up 2 o'clock in the morning to go to the market, you know, there's a woman who was toiling the soil, working very hard to produce in all its forms. And then a medical doctor, another one who's supposed to sustain life. So we have a life giver, giving life through bearing of fruit of the earth, and another life giver who was training to sustain life in all its forms, and yet life was snuffed out from them. And that is where we have reached in Dominica, where we have gotten that, we've reached a stage of disrespect for life in all its forms, where people don't think twice. I mean, just look at the number of murders we have had last year, in the last 2 years, okay? And recently there was a report that I was listening to, and I think I shared it with Matt, where Dominica is ranked one of the 7 of the most dangerous countries in the Caribbean because we have a very high per capita rate of murders. Even compared to St. Lucia, which has almost twice of our population, we have the same amount of murders as St. Lucia, just by way of comparison. Then we have other forms of disrespect for life. I said murders, the fact that we have a lot of elderly abuse in Dominica, and not to mention the fact that by and large, we have reached a stage where the cohesion, so to speak, of our society is one whereby people don't respect each other. We have very little respect for each other. We have very little respect for people in society. Men have very little respect for women. Women have very little respect. And what is even sad, I'm going to say, Mr. Gregoire, as a means of, not to be controversial, but out of sisterly concern, where our women are becoming increasingly disrespectful and abusive of themselves. You know, when I see how Dominican women would parade themselves during Carnival and in fetes, and every entertainment activity in Dominica has women on stage broken down, exposing themselves and degrading themselves to the highest level, making them look like, women are abusing themselves. When we look at even the abuse that women in Dominica impact on other women, the things that women in Dominica say about other women, what women in Dominica do to other women, how women in Dominica treat other women. And that is very, so it's not just murder that of course it is the highest form of disrespect for life, but what do we do how do we respect life as we continue to coexist with each other? Of course, the disrespect of political powers has already mentioned, and I'm not going to enunciate more about that anymore tonight. It's very sad, and it's very unfortunate that those things happen. But on a lower level, mothers disrespecting their children, children disrespecting their mothers, and again, I want to emphasize the fact that I feel very sad, to be honest with you, as a gentleman in Dominica, when I see how women in Dominica carry themselves, when I see how women in Dominica, and rightly so, and that can contribute to a lack of care when women themselves have experienced violence, as Father John Lewis was alluding to. And I quite agreed with him. I was hoping to hear an outcry. Can you imagine? Not very few National Women's Association in Dominica has condemned that. The Girl Guides, the women groups, women association, women politicians, very few of them have come out and said, okay, we have association of principles in Dominica made up of women. We have many organizations in Dominica. We have several women Calypsonians, prominent enough with a voice that could speak up and say, why is this happening to us? Why is it that these women could have been so brutally murdered? And as I think of this lady from Mont Prosper left for dead, being found on the street, it broke my heart that day, because that's a woman that I knew I bought vegetables from. That's a woman I would regularly encounter as I go to the market. And it is just unfortunate that has happened. I'm shivering, getting goosebumps as I'm speaking to you now. But it really hurt my heart to know that is how that lady had to lose her life. And foremost on my mind is the fact that we have a young girl who is languishing in the forest of Dominica somewhere since April. No one knows what has happened to her. No one knows where she is. And we have suddenly gone quiet about it. It's as if Kenisha has just evaporated and none of us don't care. That could be anybody's child. You know, we are silent about it. It has just gone dead. And you know what? As we continue to, you know, revel in Dominica, and I'm going to go there tonight. Because right after these gruesome things, we have just gone back to normal, drinking rum, siwaing, partying, fetting, celebrating as if we have not paused. We have not stopped to think or to listen. We continue on our merry way. And that is where, again, I flaunt the authorities. Because I think at some point the government of the day should have said, listen, because of where we are, let us put a pause. We're going to suspend licenses and permissions for all those fetes for a while so that Dominicans can be quiet, particularly in the season that we were in, as we were beginning the new year. Dominica should never have been able to just continue into 2023 like that. After such gruesome things and knowing what we went through last year. We had so many murders last year. When are we going to stop and pause and think and ask ourselves a question? Is that the kind of society we want to live in? Is that the kind of Dominica we want tomorrow? Is that how we want our children to grow up in? Is that how we want our grandparents to exist in? Is that the country? And not only that, you know, I mean, you walk on the streets of Roseau and people are angry. You take a wrong turn on the street and somebody wants to knock you down. You bang somebody by mistake on the streets of Roseau and they're ready to beat you down. People are fighting over food in happy hour and drink and barbecue and sandwich and stuffed eggs that have. This is I mean, these things must not be taken lightly, but we have become a society where we have gotten very we have reached a point of grave concern. I would not say it's a point of no return. Because as a man of faith, I believe that with God, everything is possible, to use a biblical cliche. But I think the time has come for us to really pause, search ourselves, search our consciences, as Dominicans, ask ourselves the trajectory that we are on now, is that where we want to go? Is that how our women should continue to live their lives in Dominica? Is that how our men should continue to treat women in Dominica? Is this a kind of political direction that we want to go, where those who are charged with the responsibility for providing stability of the country shirk their responsibility in moments like that? And Father John Lewis is on the program. Yes, he spoke, but the church's voice needs to be louder. And I do not mean the individual church's voice, I mean the collective voice of the churches. If we preach in our churches on Sunday alone, who hears us are only the people in the pews. And whether or not the Dominican population is becoming averse to listening to pastors and priests must speak out, whether or not Dominicans want to listen to them or not, whether or not Dominicans say the worst things about them, because the church has a voice, okay? And the church has to be able to stand on the foundation of the authority of the Word of God and address social situations like this. Okay? Every church in Dominica, every denomination in Dominica should collectively, and I think that is where the testimony of our faith comes in. When collectively, I always like to refer to that verse from Jesus when he says, go into the whole world, preach to nations and whatever, etc., etc. And by your unity, people will come to believe in me. I'm just paraphrasing here. So that the world will know, okay, that God sent me. And the church needs to do that. And everybody needs to do that. Because I think in moments of crisis, in moments of how you call it, instability, the church has a role to play. And whether or not people want to listen, the church must speak, because the government is silent. The social organizations are silent. The law enforcement is silent. our legal fraternity in Dominica, sadly, with the exception of Dr. Andre, is almost deaf, dumb, and mute. People who are trained in the legal profession to give us insight into the legal implications, they are all silent. And so I think that by way of opening my opening remarks, I think that's what I'd like to say, that in summary, that I think I'm very concerned that we are losing our soul. We are losing the core of our ethos of who we are as a Dominican people. And we need to take steps to regain our identity of who we are as Dominicans, as who we are as children of God, as who we are as men and women. We need to take some steps to see how we can regain some form of decency to the life that we want to craft for ourselves in Dominica.
Simeon, thanks a lot for that. I mean, really, and it's all thumbs up for this. I want to go very quickly back to Monsignor John Lewis, and I really want to give also Dr. Wallace an opportunity to engage a little bit more. And then, of course, Dr. Andre, I know he has a lot more to contribute, and Dr. Simone as well. But I just wanted to read this because I'm also receiving a lot of messages on WhatsApp. And besides that, we have quite a few people who are with us on Facebook and YouTube. But one person, I'll just read one of the messages. Somebody says, "Good evening, Mr. G. I'm not going to give names or anything. This discussion is timely and necessary at this juncture. Maybe it will take someone such as Monsignor John Lewis leading the charge to raise the awareness of the domestic issues in our country. Sometimes all it takes is the effort of one individual to spark that flame. The stance he's taken could well be the catalyst of change." I don't know what any thoughts on that, Monsignor John Lewis?
Well, you have to begin somewhere, and I heard Simeon, of course, speaking about the voice of the church, and to a certain extent, I agree with that as well. That the churches in Dominica, we have the Dominica Christian Council, and we have the Evangelical Councils, but when these things happen, they concern everyone, and in a sense, yes, I do my part because I feel very passionate about all these things, and I'm concerned about the people who sit in my pews and the people. As a pastor, I say my parish is everyone, Catholic, non-Catholic, and everyone, and I have a duty to attend to that. So when things happen to them, I speak. But there has to be also the, how shall I call it? The strength that comes from and the support that comes from others who think like me, that they too need to give the buttressing that is required so that, I can be the lone voice in the wilderness, and hopefully something will happen. John the Baptist was the voice in the wilderness crying, preparing the way of the Lord. So I could be that, but I think it's also important that those others who feel as strongly as I do need to somehow get together with me, and as two or three, let us move together and be the shakers, as it were. I will continue to do whatever I can. As a person, and I'm glad that all of you people have said this. It's not so much that I'm a priest, but I'm a human being. I live in society. I have sisters. I have brothers. I taught school for many years, and the parents. So I'm directly involved. And when things happen, I have an opinion, but not only an opinion, but I'm there, I think, to give a certain hope, to remind the people that the church and the church's message is one of love, that it's not a matter of dividing people, but bring people together. That somehow, no matter how bad things are, it can be better because we pull our resources together. That strength has to come not only from one individual, but from others. So yes, I take the challenge from whoever is suggesting that I begin, but I want you to also think of others who can come with me so that the voice can be a bit stronger and it can be more meaningful.
Yeah, and Mr. G, if I can just jump in for a minute, because I need to exit in a little while.
Yes, but could you just hang for me with 1 minute? I think Lamb is desperately trying to take a call.
Yeah, the caller has been around for a while, and I just
lost him.
Caller, please go ahead. Caller moved.
Lost call.
Hold on.
Okay, we're very
Yes, caller.
sorry.
Caller, please go ahead.
Evening.
Good evening.
Yeah, nice show. Yeah, can you all hear me?
Oh, very clearly.
Loud and clear.
Okay, lovely, beautiful. Yeah, I remember back in 2010 when Archbishop or Bishop Gilbert,
Bishop
he
Gilbert.
gave a real good sermon at the Feast of Christ the King, and he said that evil never goes away. You push it away and it tends to come back. And I think with that in mind, I think the onus is upon us to keep on, pushing the evil away. And I think that's where the problem is. I think the problem in large part comes when we fail or when we cannot give up on the fight to, keep the effort in keeping evil out. Because it always has this it always wants to be relevant, and I think we on that side, on the other side of the battle, tend to I don't know, maybe sometimes give up on the battle or pay no attention to the fact that evil never goes away. It just wants to be relevant, And point number two, I think in that same vein, I think it would be a good idea if this program could have been shared with Dominican Catholic Radio, because I was listening to Monsignor journalist talking about just of his effort in reaching out, and I think that could actually be a good start. So whenever I guess he's involved in this thing, I just have the simulcast with Dominican Catholic Radio, in terms of reaching out to the population. Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you for that.
We've got some more calls in there.
Lovely contribution.
Yeah, we lost. Good evening, caller. Thanks. Please go ahead.
Good evening, Dominica.
Good evening.
Good evening.
What a good conversation you all have, and it's not just for Dominica. We in the Virgin Island, U.S. Virgin Island, we must say we enjoy that conversation. It's a message for all men around the world, all women around the world. But I must say that our women in Dominica have a very hard time, especially financially. In order for us to curb that violence against women, we need to let them have a choice. For instance, this young lady that died in Mount Prosper, she did not only die by her boyfriend, but when I heard the interview with her family through maternity, and this lady on Saturday went in her garden, packed her bag, and she was so dirty she gonna take a rest. This lady is a young lady that has 7 children, looking to go market and make $1. It seems to me this lady don't only die by her boyfriend, but economically she had died already. Our government needs to embrace women, make them have a choice, give them opportunity, same pay. If they want to do agriculture, find market where they can make money, that they can make a choice whether to stay with a man or not. This girl, to me, had very little choice. People saying she could have backup. But a woman with 7 children, which man going to pick her up? Which man going to go to the farm and weed her garden for her without watching her? So there is so much problem in Dominica. Around the world, we have problems. Dominican women still getting $4.50 per hour. What choices do they have? They're still living in the early 50s with their pay. They have cellular. Just think of it. This government has failed the people of Dominica. What I hate is the hypocrite, the men in Dominica, they are very hypocrite. And a lot of us have to take blows. We have to take horn. A lot of us have to get horn until they turn trumpet. Because we don't want to stand up and face reality. These governments don't embrace the people, and because they don't embrace, they're not investing in the people. The men bringing less money home. And because of bringing less money home, they think that the women have to settle to nothing. Because we love, we have to agree. Well, if it's kai we eat this morning, we have to eat kai nighttime.
Yes, caller, thank you very much for that.
Developing, we're supposed to just be in love. No, we are individual, even though we're together. Everybody have their goal in life. Men have to start making choices to liberate their family.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Dr. Simone, you wanted to say something, but I just have to just put this in your mind as you said what you want, as you say what you plan to say. Think about this. This lady at Mount Prosper, she's up at 2 o'clock in the morning. She goes to her garden, she prepares her stuff, somebody assists her, gets it on a truck, and she says, listen, I'm too tired to go to the market down with you now. I will have to go and take a rest first and have a shower, take all the dirt off me because I've been out there in the soil. Think about that, her mindset. She's going to take a rest and say, then I will go down to the market to sell my produce after. And think about her mindset at the time, and then somebody comes and takes this lady's life. You know, think about that. Such a gruesome thing, Dr. Simone.
Yeah, absolutely a tragedy, Mr. G, but I have to exit in a little while. So I think what we're seeing based on all the contributions tonight, and I did take some notes because as I said in the beginning, I'm hoping that we're creating an action plan in terms of how we're moving forward. And this will be a conversation that we will revisit in the next few months so we can continue building on this action plan. But I think what we're seeing is that, you know, every individual member of society, the church, schools, civic organizations, law enforcement, the legal system, we all have a role to play in removing the scourge of domestic violence in our country. And I also think what we're starting to realize from this very fruitful conversation that we're having this evening is that there are two areas of focus that we absolutely have to concentrate on. And that is one, empowering our young girls, our women to have a voice, to speak up, to get the training, the education that they need. And also, how do we eradicate that toxic masculinity that we've all sort of alluding to, the mentality that men are superior, dominant, the aggression that comes from that. So there's a lot of work to be done, but I just wanted to leave us with this recommendation from the CDC. And it says that promoting healthy, respectful, nonviolent relationships can be promoted by addressing a couple of areas. So on an individual level, a relationship level, a community level, and a societal level. So that kind of presents the framework. It kind of gives us a foundation of where we ought to be looking at. So we have to look at the individuals. Are there mental health problems? Are there insecurity problems? Are there opportunities for empowering women economically, right? We have to look at the relationships. What does a healthy relationship look like? Because again, if you grow up in a toxic relationship and that is all you know, then when you enter a relationship, you expect it to be toxic. I've heard to the point where some women say, well, you know, if he doesn't put his hand on me, he doesn't love me. So that kind of just tells you the depth of toxicity that exists and how we have to overcome all of that. We have to find ways to disrupt the development pathways, patterns towards violence. So again, going back to the socialization, what are our boys being taught in the homes, in the school, among their peers? What are they learning? We have to create protective environments for our women. We talked about that. We have to create economic support for families. So there's a lot that can be done. But I think this is absolutely a great place to start. And I just want to say thank you to everybody who joined us on Facebook. I see we had Mr. Curtis Matthew, Mr. Gordon Henderson, Anthony Simon, and everyone else who joined us on the Facebook Live. And again, Mr. G, thank you for bringing this panel together as we begin the work to alleviate our island from domestic violence.
Oh, thank you so much for being here with us tonight, Dr. Simone. We're very grateful to Anette Sanford as well earlier on, who really graced us with her presence here, and she contributed such value, added so much value to our conversation here tonight. I know Dr. Wallace, I don't know that how long you plan to stay with us, but if you're not planning to stay too much longer, I want to give you a chance to, say a few words, since you have not really addressed us in the presence of Monsignor John Lewis and Justice Dr. Irving Andre and Simeon Joseph. So any few words that you wanted to leave with us?
Thank you for that opportunity. So I've listened to the beautiful voices, and what I'm hearing is that we are a country out of balance. A lot of balance. So there's a law of vibration. Everything is always constantly moving. You're either getting better or you're getting worse. We're never static. We're always moving. And so it seems from what we're saying tonight that we have moved, yes, but in many areas we have moved into a space that is not healthy for us, individually or collectively. What does that mean, therefore, that we need to do? We've got to come back into balance. If you've got a pendulum swinging, a pendulum is going to be swinging. Okay, hopefully. And that was my thought on the New Year when I heard about the two ladies being killed. I said to myself, this must be an opportunity for that pendulum, if it swung so far over into just hedonism and moral decay. That's what I myself have been yelling and screaming about, what I'm seeing since the summer of last year. This pendulum must come back into balance. And as one gentleman caller just said, we cannot stop pushing back, resisting the force towards abuse, the force towards just degradation, the force that moves. I love Carnival and I love Siwo. I think Siwo is a beautiful part of our culture. It's allowed us the opportunity to relieve stress and to maintain joy. And it used to be, though, that we left the scandalous stuff for 2 days before Lent, where you had permission, technically, to do whatever you wanted on the streets. But if we're doing it every time a pan knocks, where we're naked, essentially, and this is what we're doing, we've gone too far. It's hedonistic. There's not enough balance. What is the measure? What stops us? The accountability piece. It's all of that. It's the wall that we must hit that says, okay, that's enough. I think what happened at the beginning of the year was the signal that it's enough. It's time to get back into balance. It's time to get back into balance. And we know how to do this. We're the little island that created a group of centenarians. Look, that were the envy of people around the world. For a little country to have produced centenarians, the level at which we produced them, they were doing many things right. They were doing many things right that I think we have stopped doing right. And everybody on the panel tonight is on point. We're seeing the problems. The piece about women, listen, if I'm the one feeling the brunt of pain, I have to become more effective at speaking up and saying no more. I cannot be the one that's also adding to my destruction. When that incident happened, I said for a minute, look, the amount of pain I was feeling, I think it's time for the women of Dominica to do like the women of Liberia did when their men would not stop fighting. When the women of Greece decided that's enough, we've got to come back to a place of virtue. And they went on a sex strike because that's the only place they felt they had any power left. But somebody checked me gently and said, I don't know if the women of Dominica would go for that at this place where we are right now. That place where that pendulum has swung all the way over there, that women are actually quite comfortable abusing themselves. So there's a lot of work to be done. And I do believe it's all hands on deck. I don't believe it's a government problem. I don't think they have helped. I don't think they're helping much in the social arena. I must admit that. But I don't think they're the solution. They're the only solution. It's got to be, yes, the government creating safe homes for women, making domestic violence an issue, not just domestic violence, but our mental health, our ability to feel good mentally, and having resources for us to address that so that we can even work. I mean, if my mental health is out of line, how can I produce as a citizen in the country? And that's what we need. But we also need help, and we also need to step up on the community level. We have to step up at the family level. We have to step up at the individual level. I think we've gone far enough. Because I think if we keep busting that gate, keep busting through these gates, these checkpoints, we might, as Simeon alluded to, we might get to a point of no return. I do not believe we are at the point of no return yet. But as I've said, comme si nous avons penché off the falls. And it's time to reverse. And this is what I have to offer to end.
Let me just say two things, Dr. Wallace. As I go, I give Empress 5 minutes as well if she wants to say something before we come to the point where we go back. Two things. One, let us not forget the women of Iran. You know, look at what they're doing. See how they're standing up. Because they, you know, exactly, because they're telling you must cover your hair. They say, no, I don't want to cover my hair. All right. So to me, that is very significant. And so, Empress, I wanted you to see what you wanted to say. I'll give you 5 minutes.
Thank you very. You know, I am absolutely. Do you want to go? Just to say thank you so much. Thank you so much for that opportunity. It's amazing. A sister said to me not too long ago. She goes, Empress, you know, because the last time I visited Dominica was 23 years ago. So recently, you know, returning home after my father transitioned in 2019, and then coming back in 2020, you know, deciding I was going to leave my job in New York and come back. But on the premise of leaving my life in New York to come back here was based upon, yes, my father had transitioned, but during those few months before June, when I came here in 2019, I heard all these great things that were being said politically that they were going to implement into Dominica. So here I'm saying to myself, oh, I've been wanting to come back home, you know, for all this time. So now I'm here. I have the degrees I have. So I want to come back home to the land of my birth, land of my ancestors, and really contribute, you know, in Dominica. It's not that, like, a lot of people wait until they retire and then they come home. But when you retire, it's like almost like you're not fighting anymore. You're coming back home to relax. You know, just like people from the United States go to Florida, you know, they go to Florida to relax. So the diaspora is coming back saying they're coming back to relax. I did not want to come back home to Dominica to relax. I wanted to come back where I still have fight in me, where I'm still aware of what's going on around me and be able to participate in building up, you know, my island. And when I came back and I got in touch with some of the offices, as far as some of the programs that they said they were going to implement, the answers I got on some of them were, we do have it on paper per se, but it hasn't been implemented. So that's what really gets me upset to that point. There are a lot of things that's on paper, just like our laws, but nothing is being enforced. Nothing is being followed through. You know, we speak of the little girl, Kanisha, that was, we don't even know what exactly is going on with her. So when you hear of something occurring, everyone has something to say. Everyone is there. Everyone is there and they're talking about it. But give it a week, 2 weeks. Oh, we don't hear anything about it anymore. It has died down. Because for a while after we heard that, the not a gentleman, because it wasn't a gentleman, the man was murdered, by the police. Then we heard nothing else about what happened to Kanisha. And we all asking ourselves, well, what happened to that little girl? Where is she? So there's still nothing. And when that occurred last at the end of the year, beginning of the year with the two sisters, then I saw the newspaper and I saw a full page of Kanisha on that paper. And I said, but why is it now it had to take two of these brutal deaths occurring to now bring back Kanisha into play to say, oh, remember that little girl? When it should have been something that hadn't stopped, that we should have been keep on finding out what exactly happened. And it's sad to say, with the sisters that were brutally murdered, in a week, 2 weeks, we may forget the name. Not we, but the name, you won't hear the names. And they say, oh, who was that again? What's her name again? So as collectively, we all have to do our part. With everybody else saying on the panel, when I did that event on Saturday, and you asked me about it, it really hurt me to a certain extent because I felt like there should have been more people, because I posted it on all my social medias. I posted it, and to see the amount of people that really came by, I was quite surprised, because here it is, and especially for women, should have been coming out and saying, like I said to myself, no more, no more. I've had it. We should have heard more noise about what had happened, because it wasn't like to shoot a gun. It's like there's no thought to it to a certain extent. But when you listen to how brutally these sisters were murdered, it's supposed to shake everything in you to say, I cannot keep quiet anymore, from all aspects of society. It's not the church, it's not just the government, it's everyone coming and saying enough is enough. It's just like in the United States when they had the Me Too movement, and it says, that's it. Enough is enough. What are we going to do about it? And I just wanted to point on two things that I think the Monsignor or someone mentioned about with the parliamentary, with the women in the parliament. And I looked at that and I think about it and I say, it's almost like the slave mentality when you had the house slaves and you had the outside slaves. So the house slaves are saying, hey, we're doing good. We're inside now. We're inside. We're eating good. We don't want to upset anyone too much. Everything is good for us. The outside slaves are the ones that's doing all the dirty work. But in the end of it, you're still a slave, because when the master have had enough, he's still going to kill you, or he's still going to rape you, or he's the same thing he will do to the inside slave, he will do it to you also. So the women being in parliament and standing up and applauding when your sister has been wronged, there's a problem. Because in many times we're quiet and we think, you know what, I'm not going to ruffle any feathers because it took me so long to get where I am. So I'm going to be like the good little girl, or I'm not going to say anything to ruffle any feathers. And that's when I think a lot of times, sometimes they have, even back in the school system in New York or wherever I've worked, I'm one of those where I'm not one to stay quiet. When there is a problem and there's an issue, you're going to hear my voice. And I don't care what position you hold, whether you're the prime minister, you're the president, you're the school board member, I'm going to say enough is enough. I've had of it, or you're doing something wrong. And that's when everyone needs to stop being silent. Stop being silent. And when there's something that's been an injustice being done, that you stand up about it. Like this is, where you know, with the law, if there is an unjust law is no law at all. So if it's unjust for one, it's unjust for all. And I just want to say thank you to everyone. Thank you, Mr. Gregoire, for having me here, for inviting me here to be, you know, among this distinguished panel and getting to know. And I said, as I've returned home, is getting to know people and who is who in society. Sometimes I say it's a plus when you don't know certain people that have position because you're not on that mental level and saying I have to be a certain way or act a certain way because this person, you're rubbing shoulders with them, so you don't want to get up, you know, have them upset with you or whatever. I'm coming as like plain blank piece of paper and saying, here I am. This is why I don't know who you are. I don't know what status you hold. I'm just going to give my opinion on how I feel about it.
Well, we certainly know you now, Empress. We certainly know you now. But you know what? I wanted to go back to Dr. Irving Andre, because, you know, one of the things that always happens to us on this show, we keep running out of time. You know, no matter how interesting the conversation gets, at some point in time, you have to end it, right? Now, Dr. Andre, I know that you have some further thoughts. I mean, when you've listened to Simeon, you've listened to Monsignor John Lewis, you listen to Empress and Dr. Wallace and Anette Sanford, and you listen to Simone, and, you know, I mean, really and truly, I mean, there's so much wealth of knowledge and depth of knowledge coming from our people. And yet, some people are not listening to those voices. Lambi, before I go to Dr. Andrew, would you like to take a call?
Yes, there's a call on the line. Caller, please go ahead.
Yes, good night, Lambi.
Good night.
Yeah, good night to the entire panel.
Good night.
And I must say a special good night to my cousin John, who is there. Mr. G, I just want to ask a question, because I know for a long time you have been really advocating for solutions. Now, my question tonight is, when we come up with all these solutions, who are we going to take these solutions to? Shouldn't we go directly to the government? Will the government of Dominica accept these solutions? Tonight, we should even hear the clip of Baby Sarah, because this present government will not accept the solution. And so what are we going to do? Are we going to do it for ourselves? I'm asking, and nobody can answer me. I hope I get an answer tonight.
Well, let me try to answer that. I think several of our panelists have tried to answer that. They've addressed it. They've said it cannot be something for the government alone. It's all of us, all hands on deck. I believe that whoever we can do something, if we can do it together, let's do it together. I mean, every journey starts with one little step. Somebody sent me a message and said, you know, they heard the voice of Monsignor John Lewis. They're wondering if that is not the voice that can spark a movement, a change of mindset, change of attitude, you know, a change of resolve, you know, because I mean, really and truly, we cannot allow Dominica to go like this. We have to resolve that we have to take a stand now and put a stop to it now. I mean, Simeon Joseph is right. We have lost respect for life. People are just taking, I mean, if we saw how many murders, how many homicides we've had for the year, what, 17, 18, and somebody was having dinner at a restaurant, and then as they came out of having dinner, they got shot on the bayfront. What is going on with us? What are we becoming? So Simeon is right. What kind of future we want to be? What kind of people do we want to be? So I want to go.
Somebody was on a hospital bed.
Yes. Somebody
was on a hospital bed and got shot.
Right on a hospital bed. Dr. Andre, let's talk a little bit more about this going forward.
Well, obviously, we've reached a crisis in our community. And the question is, what do we do? What do we do to rescue the community from the vices of gun violence, from the total and abject disregard for law and order and for life? Are we just passive bystanders? What do we do to change this value system, to shift the paradigm? For example, we have wonderful fetes, and even during the World Creole Festival, we import at great sums, at great expense, many artists from other countries, one in particular, and they sing lyrics that are laden or laden with misogyny and with violence against women, and we cheer like we've never heard music before. And we go to great lengths to pay them huge sums of money. And we do it again and again because we aspire to a value system, quite frankly, which represents a negation or an abortion of all what is good about equality. How do we shift that paradigm? We should force change. We should force the authorities to change. We cannot wait for them to change. On the contrary, they unfortunately have perpetuated many of the stereotypes that ultimately lead and culminate in gender violence. The question is, what do? We talk about the church and the church, what the church can do more, but let us all remember that the church is not the collection of priests. The church is the congregation. What is the congregation prepared to do? Animated by their faith, animated by the biblical teaching that whatever you do to the least of my brothers, that you do unto me. Animated by the belief that salvation, quite frankly, does not solely rest in prayer, but in action. Action which bespeaks and which reflects the kind of attention which the Father had for the lowly and the dispossessed, for the prostitutes or the sex workers and those who were economically disadvantaged. So our church, our belief is not something we can put on a shelf after match on Sunday and take it back up on the next Sunday and go to church and put it back on the shelf again. We have to transcend that limitation or that limited view of our faith. And the fact of the matter is, only we can save ourselves. If we are not benefiting from the enabling environment created by the political directorate, then we have to try our utmost to help create that enabling environment. And this is why it is so imperative that we are all not bystanders in this sorry state of affairs. We all have a role to play. And to the extent that we're not prepared to play that role, then we will be the authors of our own decline or misfortune. So if there's anything to be taken from this wonderful meeting, this August gathering of persons who express their views so eloquently and candidly, it is that citizens or citizenry has its price. And that price is not to sit by the wayside, as that famous song, was it Otis Redding? Watching the tide roll away. We have to create the tide for change, and to create the tide for a future where we can at least give hope and faith and energy and ventilation to all those wonderful notions of equality and decency that we hold so dear. So the future is ours. It is ours to change. Thank you.
And you're quite right. It is ours to change. And, still addressing that question, Monsignor John Lewis, the caller wants to know what it is that we can do. He's talking about, the government won't do anything because some people in the political directorate may be considered part of the perpetrators.
What I want to say to all of this is any conversion experience begins with a sense of disgust. I don't think a lot of our people are disgusted enough with the situation. There's a certain lethargy, there's a certain inertia, there's a certain indifference. Until you get to the point where you say, this is disgusting, I am disgusted with the situation, you will not move. And the second stage after that is to have a desire, a deep burning desire for something better. So you're disgusted with what you have, and then you have the desire for something better. You dream big, and then you put the possibilities in place. And then the next step is to decide, make a decision, to be strong enough to say, I have the will, and I can, and I will with the rest of my community. And the last stage is resolve, to make a resolution that never again. This is not going to happen again. So I think maybe that is part of the difficulty now, that people are not, as I said earlier, when these two murders occurred, I thought I would see in the streets of Roseau women marching. Nothing was said. It was like, okay, well, it's just like commonplace. No, we have to be disgusted enough with the situation to say that cannot happen again. And then go to the next step and say, I desire something better. I deserve something better than that. And then move on to say, let's decide together. Collectively, let us make a decision. And then a resolution that we have to move on and make things better for the future.
Yes, and you could not have said it any better. Simeon, Joseph, I mean, as you can see, the time is running out on us, and we have to wrap it up at some point, and I think that point is coming very shortly now. Any final words from you? You ought to unmute your mic, huh? Don't forget.
I want to take up from where Monsignor John was left off, because I was struck by his point that the first point of conversion is disgust. Okay, but what came to mind there is that I chuckled at it and I said, well, I wonder whether we will ever be disgusted at what's happening, or whether we have become too complacent and too compliant with the things that are happening around us. Complacent because we have reached a stage where we tend to maybe accept the way things are, that is how it is, that we have grown into a kind of apathetic position whereby we don't care, anything goes, whatever happens happens. Okay, especially depends on who's doing it. It's okay, all right. And if it's not me, it has nothing to do with me, then I should not be too bothered about it. And compliance, because of the fact that it seems to me a vast sector of Dominica's population, or the people in Dominica who should be concerned enough to do something about it, just don't care. And so, and so that maybe could mean that we have become a very compromised society, because there are many women who accept that kind of treatment and perpetuate that kind of abuse and are silent about it and pretend to be deaf about it. So, and there are many people, I suppose, who would maybe have accepted positions, money, power, prestige, opportunity in all of this. And so because they have been so complacent and so compromised, they will never be disgusted about the situation. However, I'm happy to know that he mentioned the fact that we have to have desire and decide and a resolve. And I just want to leave two suggestions on the table as we leave tonight. The first one has to be an individual decision that has to be made by people who have been abused. And secondly, what can we do as a nation? Because the nation cannot do anything unless the individuals themselves decide to do something. And so I think that is where I say we have to take ownership of the process, and take ownership of the process, because we have to realize that the security and safety of women in our society is not exclusively something for women. Everybody has to take responsibility for that. Everybody has to take ownership of it. And that we have to reach the stage where we can clothe our women with honor and encourage our women to clothe themselves with honor, okay? And embrace the dignity that womanhood carries. That's very important. Womanhood carries with a certain level of dignity, which I think today women themselves have thrown away. And they have to regain that dignity, because there are two words that I always associate with women: honor and dignity. And we have to realize that, and if we don't realize it, we can do women anything. But first, I think what I'd like to suggest to women who have been abused and those who want to help them is, from an individual perspective, I think we need to reach a stage for healing. There must be healing, because There's no doubt about it. A lot of women in Dominica have been abused. There are a lot of women who are quiet about the abuse. There are a lot of prominent women in Dominica, women who are married to policemen, politicians, pastors, and people who have positions. And so they hide it. They conceal it because they're afraid to let people know that they are being abused. And as well, they don't want to expose that shame of being subject to abuse. But I think they have to come to the stage where they realize they're going to need healing. And healing is important from sort of shedding that burden of abuse that they carry. And to find places of safety, I think that was mentioned tonight. They have to find that place of safety. If they cannot get safety outside, they have to reach a place of safety where they can begin to take life one day at a time and begin that step of healing back to life. I think the second thing they would need to do is to find a stable environment so that they can exist, so that they can coexist. So, and in finding that stable environment, they may begin to love themselves again, because women who have been abused sometimes don't love themselves. They feel devalued. Their self-esteem is diminished. And so they have to come to a stage where they need to love themselves again, because if you love yourself, you will cherish who you are. You will maintain your dignity and your honor. And to find that unconditional support from people who can help them, people who can love them, people who can support them, so that they can get their purpose back in life. Because it's very important to be purposeful in life. And then learn to share their experiences so that they can come to a stage of forgiveness. Because one of the things I don't want women to do is carry the burden of hate and revenge when they have been abused, because it can imprison them. It can cause them not to love again. It can cause them to be fearful of relationships. It can cause them to even not love themselves. So that's from an individual perspective. I'd like to close by saying I think we need to begin to think seriously on a national level of what we intend to do. And so I suggest we need to look at a five-pronged approach where society has, the Dominican society and the directorate and the authorities in Dominica must begin to ask themselves, first step, how can we help these women? What can we do to help them? Some tangible ways of setting up structures. And maybe that is where the church, the government, the different organizations in Dominica can come together and establish places of refuge and security and under that umbrella, provide them with all the financial, psychological, and emotional support that they need. And then I think the second thing we'll have to do is treatment. Okay, we will have to see how we can treat women and other people, men as well, children as well, or anybody who has been abused as well, people who have experienced abuse, political and economic. And make no mistake about it, in Dominica today, there's a lot of political and economic abuse. People who have been deprived of jobs and livelihood and stability and are going through a lot of pain, hurt, regret, and even sometimes anger. Okay, so we have to be able to provide that kind of treatment to people by any way we can, through professional help, through psychological help, through even psychiatric help, as the case may be, and social help, and emotion, and of course, spiritual direction. Very often we divorce and we exempt spiritual direction from obtaining that wholeness we need in life. We go to all kinds of professionals, but we avoid going for that spiritual direction that we need. And then I would like to say that we need to look at some intervention policies that we can put in place. Dr. Andre mentioned a list of them earlier on, but we need to have as a nation some intervention thing where the police, the magistracy, the social welfare division, again, I mentioned the church, our schools, okay, where we have to re-educate, so to speak, our young women and our young men into what that is. So we need some, and lastly, I would say prevention. Okay, and so as I've said, from a individual level and from a national level, I think that is where we have to go. We have to, I would just summarize by saying, we have to get those who have been abused to find some wholeness in life, to restore their sense of self-worth and appreciation for who they are and what they can become. Okay? As the children of God, we have to be able to maximize our full potential to have that life and have it in abundance. Because that's what we have to have, life in abundance. And anything that prevents us or hinders us from having life in abundance, we have to find where we can obtain the right ingredients to live our life to the fullest. And living a full life is not drinking rum and partying. Okay? It's being happy, content within yourself and who you are. And also on a national level, I think whereas we may want women to regain some form of self-worth, we must ask ourselves as a nation, what are we doing about it? For too long, we have been quiet. For too long, we have ignored it. For too long, we have brushed it under the carpet. And for too long, we have normalized the abuse in Dominica. And I think the authorities and the right organizations must now begin to send a message that as a country, we're not going to tolerate this. As a country, we are going to work towards ensuring that the dignity of people is preserved, wherever it is. And we have to, as a country, decide what we will accept, what we will not accept, so that we can reach that stage of disgust that Father John we spoke about, and then begin to move to where we have to go. I think that's how I would like to end my contribution tonight.
Yeah, a pretty decent way to end it with a summary of recommendations here. As I go to Monsignor John Lewis for his final remarks, I want to just read something from one of the message on my MS on my WhatsApp page. It says one of the key areas that require immediate attention is making it safe for the victims to give evidence without putting them in harm's way. Should start by putting measures in place that provides the necessary protection for vulnerable people giving evidence, prevent the intimidation of witnesses. Intimidated witnesses are those whose quality of testimony is likely to be diminished by reason of fear or distress at the prospect of giving evidence. Victims in sexual assault cases are in this victimization. Other witnesses who may be considered to be intimidated witnesses include those who have experienced domestic violence, those who have experienced past or repeat harassment and bullying or repeat victimization, those who self-neglect and self-harm the elderly and frail witnesses, threatening to murder those who are making allegations against professionals or careers. And it says, sadly, Dominican society is so desensitized to violence and wrongdoing, they become numb to everything around them. Monsignor John Mathieu.
Well, this is sort of what I was referring to in terms of the indifference that seems to be setting in so many. It doesn't appeal to me, it doesn't apply to me, my family's fine, then it's not my problem. That cannot be. If one person hurts, the whole society is hurting. If there's one incident of injustice, we all have to be concerned about it. And yes, it is true. People who have been relegated to any form of injustice, whether it's domestic violence or otherwise, they should be able to speak without any sort of intimidation or without any fear of being somehow relegated to more abuse. And which means that you have to have a society where people feel safe. They feel that they have a voice, regardless of their social status, that they have a voice because of their dignity as a human being, and someone will listen to them and someone will take up their cause. So we have to develop that. And I go back to education. I really go back to education. You know, on all of our schools, you have the 6 pillars of character counts. I don't know if I remember them all, but one of them is trustworthiness. And the other one, I think, is fairness. And one of them is responsibility. All 6 of them speak to building the character of the individual so that we recognize that each of us has a part to play. When I think, for example, of the woman who was killed in Mount Prosper, I say, you mean to say the people never noticed that this woman was being harassed in her life? When the houses so close to each other, you must hear, you must know, and nobody did anything, called someone. No, I'm not blaming, maybe they did call, but I'm just saying that we have to develop the sense that we are all in it together, and we are our brothers and sisters keeper. We can't allow things to happen and say, well, it's not my business because it's not me. As this old saying goes, and we're all in it together. So it's to develop that sensitivity and that sense of responsibility for one another. That's what I would say in terms of making sure that people who are abused feel free enough to be able to speak their mind without being judged and without being put into further stress because they're coming out to speak about what happened to them.
And thank you so much, Monsignor John Lewis. Justice Dr. Irving Andre, you have the final word. And you need to unmute your mic. You want to unmute your mic, Dr. Andre? You're muted.
Yes, let me thank and commend all the panelists, those who featured in the first installment of this program, and obviously all of us who featured in the second installment. Again, I think even by speaking out, there is hope for change. There is the promise for change, because the fact of the matter is, if one person speaks, there are others who will listen. And although we may not be aware of it, others will be persuaded that this cause is just. And I think it needs no repeating that we are at a juncture that every person must come aboard the cause of righteousness and the cause of justice. These issues are just too important to be left in the hands or in the voices of a select few. Because when more persons come abroad, the so-called select few are emboldened, they are strengthened in their conviction and in their desire to continue the fight for justice in Dominica. To some extent, we have been seduced and we have been desensitized by social media. We have been desensitized by social media because all too often these days, there are horrific videos of violence, of persons, including women, being beaten by their partners, of persons fighting, oftentimes with weapons. And it has become almost a kind of voyeuristic society where we fight to put the first images of violence on social media. I think that is one of the desensitizing aspects of this thing, this instrument that has such a great potential for education and, quite frankly, for social redemption. But we are here. We recognize the problem. We have become advocates for a solution. And there is every hope and every confidence in my mind that with so many powerful voices together, united by a sense of outrage, united by a sense of purpose, united by a conviction to make a difference, there's absolutely no doubt that things will get better. How soon? I don't know. But this journey is not one that will be won overnight. It is one that will be prosecuted with every vigor, every fiber of each other's being, but it will be one which we will win. And so when I live here, I again thank you for the honor of participating in this event this evening. I know that, Mr. G, you have many listeners out there, and many of them, quite frankly, will leave reinvigorated, reassured that they are on the right side of history. And that is basically what we want, a conviction to make a change. And there's no doubt that that conviction is alive and well in Dominica and elsewhere. Once again, I thank all the panelists, all the listeners, Q95, Lambi, who's quite frankly Lazarus in many senses, and Sherwin. And let us look forward to the day when we will embrace each other as equals, not as persons to extract a favor or two for a few dollars more. So once again, thank you and good night.
Good night,
Thank
Dr.
you.
Andre.
Thank you very much.
Well, Lambi is, you cannot be destroyed. He's indestructible. Lambi is a giant. Right now, but I just want to thank all our panelists tonight, Dr. Andre, Simeon, Monsignor John Lewis, Dr. Wallace, Anette Sanford, Dr. Simone, and Empress. I want to thank all of you. I also want to thank all of those folks who stayed with us throughout the night on Facebook and on YouTube and been sending all these WhatsApp messages. I'm sure some of you also got some WhatsApp messages. I certainly got quite a few. I really only had a chance to read 2 of them, but it is really good when you see people are listening and they appreciate. There's a lot of appreciation for what is going on, but most of all, people are adding their own suggestions, and that is quite good. So I think, Monsignor John Lewis, you're quite right. Somebody asked whether your voice is that voice that is going to create that impetus, that is going to, let's maybe it is, who knows? When they put Mandela away and Mandela came out, look at what he became president. Who knows? It is possible that your voice may be the catalyst that might create a movement for change. So let's hope that your other associates are listening, and it's not just the churches, it's not just the denominations, as Dr. Andre said, it is the congregations, multitudes of people. And I hope they're listening, and I hope some mindsets will change and they can come to feel more disgusted by what is happening, more outraged by what is happening, so that the women in particular who are in parliament, they must become outraged when they see their fellow women in parliament being abused like that. They must feel a sense of outrage and react to it and say something. They must find their feet, find their voice and stand firm. All right. So I just want to thank everybody for being with us tonight. And I want to thank you, our panelists, making doing such a great job. And I hope to see you again soon. And I hope we invite you again, Monsignor John Lewis, that you might be willing to come and have a little chat with the people at home and abroad. I think they love to hear you. They love you. And
as long as I'm able, I will certainly come.
Well, you're only in your 70s. You have you look at the way you're looking here tonight. You look like you have 30 more years to go.
Well, we leave that to the Lord.
Yes.
In all things we say, praise God.
And if you continue to associate with people like Irving Andre, you might make it beyond 30 more.
There you are.
Yes, go ahead.
I just want to say thank you myself for the invitation. Yeah. And I felt very honored to be among such a wonderful group of people and to share thoughts together, to converse, to share ideas, and to recognize that, we all have a part to play. And whatever little bit we can contribute, we don't know how far it'll go. So we do it to the best of our ability, and we say, let God do the rest.
Thank you.
Indeed. Thank you all very much, and have a good night.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, everybody. Thank you. Good night.
Good night, everybody on Facebook, everybody on YouTube. Good night, folks.
Good night.
My window, and I'm a thinking of tomorrow, and I'm a wondering what the future will be. Thinking of the children who are the victims of oppression, beaten down by wars and eaten up by starvation. I'm saying, when this ugly will be over, and the children can go out and play.